Chapter 121. That's great. Yun Ruoyan was delighted that Xianxia was willing to teach her how to concoct poison. I'm always being poisoned by others. Once I learn how to concoct poison, I'll be able to poison others. However, Xianxia wasn't sure if its decision was the right one. Yun Ruoyan hadn't even learned how to concoct pills, and it was worried that teaching her how to concoct poison would lead her astray. However, staying alive was the most important thing. Regardless of whether she was led astray or not, poisoning others was always better than being poisoned by others. I have a question, Yun Ruoyan began. Why do I have to learn how to concoct poison in order to concoct an antidote? Because to concoct an antidote for every poison, one has to have a deep understanding of the poison's ingredients and the concoction process, Xianxia explained. In some cases, one has to place the ingredients in the correct order during the concoction process. Those who know how to concoct poison might not necessarily know how to concoct antidotes, but those who know how to concoct antidotes are bound to know how to concoct poison. But there are exceptions, Xianxia added after a moment's thought. What exceptions? Yun Ruoyan asked. Saint-grade antidotes, Xianxia explained. For example, the phoenix jewel you obtained from the imperial territory, and the high-grade antidote that the slaughtering king gave you. Such antidotes are capable of curing almost 100 poisons. It's just that this kind of saint-grade detoxification spirit medicine is too rare and hard to obtain. Although Yun Ruoyan's spiritual and mental energy had mostly recovered, she couldn't overuse them until she was fully recovered. As a result, Xianxia wasn't in a hurry to have Yun Ruoyan concoct poison. Yun Ruoyan spent the entire day in her quarters meditating. Yun Maxiao hadn't come looking for her, but she wasn't in a hurry to find him. She guessed that Yun Maxiao must be having a mental battle. She guessed that Yun Maxiao had been fighting with himself since last night, and this battle would last for 2 to 3 days. To her surprise, Yun Maxiao had made his decision after only one night, and was currently sleeping soundly in her quarters. Another 2 days passed, during which Yun Ruoyan cultivated in her quarters. At night, Yun Ruoyan's spiritual vortex was finally filled with spiritual energy, and her mental energy had fully recovered. Xianxia, that's great. Tomorrow, I'll be able to continue my pill-making training, Yun Ruoyan murmured to Xianxia. Puzzled, Yun Ruoyan called out in her mind, Xianxia, why aren't you talking? Mistress, have you sensed an unfamiliar aura around your residence these past 2 days? Xianxia suddenly asked. A few days ago, her mental strength had been lacking, and she had been so focused on cultivating that she hadn't really noticed. Hearing Xianxia's words, Yun Ruoyan immediately became alert. She raised her mental energy to its peak, trying to sense her surroundings. Indeed, Yun Ruoyan could sense a faint aura, but it was still quite a distance away from her rooms. It must have been one of the servants who happened to pass by. Yun Ruoyan could sense that the person's aura was faint and didn't seem to be an expert. I thought so too at first, Xianxia said, but this aura has been lingering around the area for the past few days. Master should be careful. The night passed uneventfully, and the next day was the last day of Yun Maxiao's vacation. If Yun Maxiao was prepared to return to the barracks, he would depart the next day. After Peony helped Yun Ruoyan wash up, Xilan brought her breakfast. Mistress, there's your favorite bird's nest soup today. Xilan's face was full of joy. Yun Ruoyan took a sip of the soup and looked up to see that Xilan was still smiling. Xilan, what's so happy about? Mistress, you still don't know? Xilan glanced at Peony, who shook her head. Then I won't tell you. I'll wait for someone else to tell you, mistress. Xilan didn't wait for Yun Ruoyan to finish eating before walking out with the tray. Peony. Yun Ruoyan looked at Peony, who waved her hand. Mistress, please enjoy your meal. The housekeeper sent me to collect my monthly stipend yesterday, so I have to go now. What's the matter? Why are you so secretive? Yun Ruoyan smiled as she sipped on the bird's nest soup. As soon as Yun Ruoyan walked into the courtyard, she heard Ling Lan humming a tune. Yun Ruoyan walked over to her. When Ling Lan saw her, she smiled and greeted her, Mistress. Ling Lan, you're the most obedient of all. Tell me, what's making you so happy? Yun Ruoyan looked at Ling Lan. Ling Lan looked at the tips of her feet awkwardly. She stammered for a long time, unable to form a complete sentence. All right, I won't make things difficult for you. Yun Ruoyan waved her hand. As if she'd been pardoned, Ling Lan hurriedly dragged her broom away. What's going on? Why are you so happy and why are you hiding it from me? Yun Ruoyan's eyes suddenly lit up. Could it be? Yun Ruoyan hurriedly rushed to her cottage, only to be told that her brother had left early in the morning. Yun Ruoyan had no choice but to return to her cottage. As soon as she entered, she saw her brother standing in the courtyard, waiting for her. Brother! Yun Ruoyan called out. I even went to your cottage to look for you, but the servant said that you'd left early in the morning. I was there to send him off, Yun Moxiao replied. Send him off? Yun Ruoyan asked curiously. To whom? To send my guards out of the city. Their vacation is almost up and they have to hurry back to the barracks. Although Yun Ruoyan's guess was pretty close, she couldn't help but feel excited to hear Yun Moxiao say it himself. However, she still had to pretend that she didn't know anything. Brother, why did you send them away first? Are you going back alone? Yun Moxiao patted Yun Ruoyan's head dotingly. I'm not leaving. Brother, you're really not leaving. By this point, Yun Ruoyan was completely sure that her plan had come to fruition, but because she was so excited she couldn't quite believe it. Why were you crying? Yun Moxiao hurriedly wiped her tears away when he saw her tearful face. Yun Ruoyan held her brother's hand and pressed her face against his palm. Feeling the warmth of his palm, her tears flowed even more profusely. In both her past and present life, Yun Ruoyan had woken up crying at the sight of her brother's cold corpse. Finally, this nightmare was over. Brother, you're not trying to coax me, are you? Yun Ruoyan reconfirmed. Silly sister. Yun Moxiao reached out and pulled Yun Ruoyan into his embrace. I'm really not leaving this time. I'll stay with you. Yun Ruoyan snuggled into her brother's embrace, feeling a sense of security that she had never felt before. Young Master Yun came yesterday afternoon to say that he wasn't leaving. Peony appeared out of nowhere and smiled. But Miss was cultivating at the time and we didn't want to disturb you. I really wanted to tell Miss the good news, but it'd be more pleasant to hear it from young Master Yun himself. Shilan also came over and Ling Lan nodded by her side. Alright, you three girls, each more creative than the last. Yun Ruoyan chided. The siblings then went to the Lin Manor. When Yun Moxiao told everyone that he wouldn't be returning to the barracks, they cheered even louder. Why would your father agree if he didn't return to the barracks? Lin Zainan asked. Yun Ruoyan hadn't considered this question. As long as Yun Moxiao could stay, nothing else mattered. I haven't told him yet, Yun Moxiao replied. I've already sent a letter to my master, and once the army approves, everything will be set in stone. Even if father doesn't agree, there's nothing he can do about it. At most, I'll be reprimanded. Lin Zainan patted his tall grandson on the shoulder. A good man must not only be able to protect his country, but also his friends and family. With you here, I'll be more at ease. Grandfather, Yun Ruoyan called out. Yun Ruoyan turned to Lin Zainan. My spiritual energy has fully recovered, and I'd like to continue my training as a pill master. Within the pill-making chambers, Yun Moxiao, Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen were all watching from the side. Lin Zainan and Yun Ruoyan stood in front of the furnace, and Yun Ruoyan was about to begin her first attempt at refining pills. The first step is to ignite the furnace with scarlet fire, Lin Zainan began. As he spoke, Yun Ruoyan raised her hands and formed a circle in front of her, and a scarlet spiritual energy seeped out from her palms. Yun Ruoyan controlled the fire-attuned spiritual energy to revolve around it. When the spiritual energy turned into a whirlwind, Lin Zainan called out, "That's enough. Ignite the furnace." Yun Ruoyan pushed hard with her palms, pushing the spiritual energy into the furnace. With a loud boom, the furnace was ignited, its scarlet glow illuminating the two chelants on the furnace. "Sister Ruoyan, you did it!" Lin Qingxue exclaimed excitedly. Lin Qingchen smiled, her eyes filled with longing. In her heart she set a goal for herself. In 2 years she would light a furnace and refine pills just like her sister Ruoyan had done. Yun Moxiao, on the other hand, was incomparably shocked. He hadn't expected that the little girl who had been sobbing in a corner 4 years ago would become a pill master. As he looked at Yun Ruoyan's figure engulfed in scarlet flames, he felt a myriad of emotions. Today we'll be refining a low-grade pill, a darkened heavens pill. Lin Zainan had long since prepared the herbs required for the pill, and he stood to the side with his hands clasped behind his back, not intending to instruct Yun Ruoyan any further. Yun Ruoyan looked at the 20 or so herbs on the stone table beside her, and she knew that Lin Zainan was testing her. She closed her eyes and recalled the last time Lin Zainan had refined the Darkened Heavens pill. His every movement was still vivid in her mind. Yun Ruoyan opened her eyes, waved her hand and placed the stargrass into the furnace, followed closely by the other 4 herbs. Yun Ruoyan controlled the flames in the furnace, turning from scarlet to orange then to yellow. She controlled the timing and rhythm of the 3 flames almost exactly the same as when Lin Zainan had refined the pill. As time passed, the herbs slowly melted under the heat of the 3 flames, slowly fusing together until they formed a pill that emitted a medicinal fragrance. Collect the pills. Lin Zainan nodded. Yun Ruoyan stretched out her hand toward the pill on top of the cauldron, and it floated into her palm as if guided by spiritual energy. Yun Ruoyan smiled as she looked at the pill in her hand, which emitted a faint medicinal aroma. She had finally succeeded in refining her first pill. However, whether it passed or not depended on Lin Zainan's judgment. Chapter 122. Yun Ruoyan handed the pill to Lin Zainan, who held it between his fingers with one hand and stroked his white beard with the other, examining it carefully. By then Yun Moxiao, Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen had all gathered around. They waited nervously for Lin Zainan's verdict, Yun Ruoyan especially nervous. Although Yun Ruoyan hid it well, Yun Moxiao could still see her nervousness. He patted her shoulder lightly and gave her a reassuring smile. Inferior, Lin Zainan replied after a long pause. What? Why would it be inferior? Lin Qingxue didn't understand. Isn't it pretty good? Lin Qingchen and Yun Moxiao also looked confused. Qingchen, Lin Zainan called out to Lin Qingchen. Bring me the Darkened Heavens pill that I refined that day. Lin Qingchen nodded and entered the storeroom to retrieve a red wooden box, which she handed to Lin Zainan. Lin Zainan opened the box to reveal that the pill he had refined for Yun Ruoyan the other day was the superior-grade Darkened Heavens pill that he had demonstrated to her. Lin Zainan placed the 2 pills next to each other and compared them. As the saying went, it was better to compare the 2 pills. He had thought that Yun Ruoyan's Darkened Heavens pill wasn't bad, but when he compared it to the pill in the red wooden box he could immediately tell the difference. Round but not full, shiny but not crystalline, with a faint medicinal aroma. It's inferior, Lin Zainan commented. Yun Ruoyan exhaled softly, a little discouraged. Haha. Lin Zainan laughed. It's already good enough that you managed to refine a pill on your first try. Don't be discouraged. That's right, Sister Ruoyan, you're already amazing. Lin Qingxue agreed. Refining pills isn't easy in the first place, and it's impressive that you succeeded on your first try. Although Lin Qingchen hadn't started refining pills yet, she had a wealth of theoretical knowledge, and she admired Yun Ruoyan from the bottom of her heart. The crowd's words didn't relax Yun Ruoyan. She took the pill from Lin Zainan's hands. Darkened Heavens pills are low-grade spiritual pills, and this one is the worst of the worst. It can't be kept. She was about to crush the pill in her hand. Wait. Yun Moxiao's gaze landed on the Darkened Heavens pill in Yun Ruoyan's hand. Darkened Heavens pills are essential to the army, and even though they're inferior, they're still in high demand. It can allow ordinary people to open up their meridians and absorb spiritual energy into their bodies. Although it can't be used for cultivation, it's still good for strengthening the body. Don't waste it. In the end, Yun Ruoyan didn't destroy the low-grade Darkened Heavens pill, allowing Lin Qingchen to find a box to store it away. After leaving the pill-making chambers, Lin Qingchen invited the 2 of them to her bamboo garden. Cousin Xiao, I heard that you are now a 5th-level beast tamer. Lin Qingchen said, I have many magical beasts in my garden. I would like to invite you to take a look. When Lin Qingxue heard that they were going to bamboo garden, she immediately retreated, saying that Miss Xiao had invited her for tea. Before leaving, she didn't forget to remind Yun Moxiao that tomorrow would be the autumn festival. Yun Moxiao promised her that he would go shopping with her to buy a gift, so he naturally wouldn't go back on his word. He smiled and said, Get up early tomorrow. I'll pick you up to go to the market. Lin Qingxue's eyes turned into crescents as she skipped away. The main reason Lin Qingxue wanted Yun Ruoyan and Yun Moxiao to go to her bamboo garden was to see the little white snake. In just half a month, Yun Ruoyan found that the snake had grown to the size of a bowl, and the crystal container it had been in could no longer contain it. Lin Qingchen placed it in a small pond in her garden. Yun Maxiao and Yun Ruoyan squatted down and looked into the pond with interest. Cousin Xiao, have you seen this kind of snake before? Lin Qingchen pointed at the white snake lazily lying at the bottom of the pond. Yun Maxiao shook his head. I've seen quite a few mutated snakes, but I've never seen a white one. Yun Ruoyan looked at Whitey lying quietly in the pond. Perhaps because silver and white were very similar, the image of Li Mo lying at the bottom of the pond suddenly appeared in her mind. This pond wasn't here the last time I was here. Is it new? Yun Ruoyan asked casually. Lin Qingchen's garden wasn't small, but it was filled with all sorts of wild beasts, and magical beasts took up a lot of space. There was already a pond in the garden, but there was only a single catfish in it. I originally planned to keep Whitey and Whitey together. The catfish was green, so Lin Qingchen called it Whitey. But Whitey would sometimes emit a cold aura. One night, I heard Whitey crying, so I rushed out to take a look, only to find that the entire pond had been frozen solid. If I hadn't come out to take a look, Little Blue would have frozen to death. Lin Qingchen's heart was still pounding. I've seen snakes that can spit fire, but this is the first time I've seen one that can emit cold aura. Yun Maxiao's interest was piqued. He stood up and looked at Lin Qingchen. Do you have a contract with this snake? No, Lin Qingchen replied. I'm not a beast tamer, so I can't voluntarily form a contract with a magical beast. Whitey didn't invite me either. On the Qinyuan continent, humans could form contracts with magical beasts, and there were two ways in which a contract could be formed. One was for a beast tamer to tame a magical beast and force it into a contract. The prerequisite for this was that the human had to be a beast tamer, and that the human had to be strong enough to control the tamed beast. The second way was for the beast to recognize itself as its master and voluntarily form a contract with the human. In this case, the human had to be a beast tamer, and the human had to be strong enough to control the tamed beast. Yun Ruoyan and Whitey belonged to this category, but it was extremely rare. Yun Maxiao's intentions were clear. He wanted to tame Whitey as his own magical beast. A beast tamer could have 3 contracted magical beasts at the same time, and Yun Maxiao only had one at the moment. That's great. Yun Maxiao exclaimed excitedly. I've been looking for a second magical beast and I've finally found one. Lin Qingchen was a little startled by Yun Maxiao's words. She wanted to say something, but when she saw Yun Maxiao's excited expression, she swallowed her words. Whitey's sudden transformation from a cute baby snake to its current bulky form surprised Yun Ruoyan quite a bit. Coupled with Lin Qingchen's description of Whitey, Yun Ruoyan was once again reminded of her unpleasant memories of snakes. As a result, even though she could tell that Lin Qingchen was reluctant to part with Whitey, she didn't try to stop Yun Maxiao. After all, Yun Maxiao was a professional beast tamer and Lin Qingchen wasn't. It would be safer to leave a dangerous beast like the snake to him. Move aside, I'm going to tame this white snake. Yun Maxiao gestured for Yun Ruoyan and Lin Qingchen to step back. Yun Ruoyan helped Lin Qingchen back. This was the first time she had seen a beast tamer tame a magical beast, and she was looking forward to it. If Lin Qingxia knew that she had missed out on such an exciting scene, she would surely be so upset that she wouldn't be able to eat. Yun Maxiao stood by the edge of the pond, one hand dipping into the water. Then he circulated the spiritual energy in his spiritual vortex and injected it into the water. With his hand as the center, ripples began to spread in all directions. The ripples grew larger and larger, eventually forming waves that crashed against the walls of the pond. The white snake, which had been in a deep slumber in the water, finally reacted. First, it raised its head and looked at Yun Maxiao with its large bell-like eyes. Hey! Yun Maxiao couldn't help but exclaim. This is the first time I've seen a snake with such large, watery eyes. Generally speaking, the eyes of a magical snake were large and lifeless, and as their cultivation increased, their eyes would degenerate until they were nothing more than decorations. However, Whitey's eyes were clearly different from those of other snakes. When other snakes sensed movement, their first reaction was to tilt their head and listen, or to sniff with their nostrils. But when Whitey sensed movement, its first reaction was to stare straight at the source of the sound with its large, watery eyes. Come out. Yun Maxiao saw that even though he had injected spiritual energy into the water, he hadn't managed to force the white snake out. With a loud shout, he plunged his palms into the water and used his unique skill, suction palm. The water in the pond was actually sucked out of the pond along with his palms. The white snake was also sucked out of the pool. Yun Maxiao waved his hand and a wave of spiritual energy hit the white snake's body. The white snake fell to the stone ground beside the pool, and the water in the pool fell back into the pool, making a loud splash. Yun Maxiao walked in front of the white snake, bit his finger and drew a contract array in the air. Formed by blood, the mysterious contract array that contained the special spiritual energy of a beast tamer floated in front of Yun Maxiao. Go! Yun Maxiao pointed at the white snake and the contract array pressed towards the white snake. Although Whitey's size had increased, it wasn't any smarter or more agile. In fact, it had only been less than 3 months since it hatched. At this moment, Whitey's large, watery eyes stared blankly at the blood-red contract array that was approaching it. Before it could even react to what was happening, the diagram of the formation was imprinted on its head. With a sizzling sound as if a soldering iron had been seared into flesh, the formation emitted a puff of white smoke, and the air was immediately filled with a burning smell. Little White was stunned for a moment, then rolled on the ground due to the sudden pain. Whitey! Lin Qingshan couldn't bear to see Whitey in pain, and she subconsciously wanted to run over. Afraid that she would be hurt, Yun Ruoyan held her back tightly. Accept the contract and submit to me. Yun Maxiao stood in front of the white snake, his tall body emitting the aura of a strong cultivator. As Yun Maxiao's aura increased, the contract array imprinted on Whitey's forehead became hotter and hotter. Whitey rolled on the ground in pain and large droplets of tears flowed from its eyes. Submit to me and you won't have to suffer anymore, Yun Maxiao said. Whitey rolled on the ground in pain, once again falling into the pond, then leaping from one pond to another, causing little Qing to scream loudly. But even after a long while, Whitey still didn't submit. Yun Maxiao's personality had always been one to be stronger than the strong. He once again brought Whitey out of the pool and onto the shore. Whitey's body was now covered in wounds and fresh blood flowed down its white scales. It was a tragic sight. Good endurance, Yun Maxiao praised. I'm determined to have you. If you still don't submit, I'll have to add a second contract. Whitey lay on the ground on the verge of death. Fresh blood flowed from the corner of its mouth, but its bright eyes stared at Lin Qingshan, who was also staring at it. Chapter 123. When Lin Qingshan met Whitey's gaze, she couldn't help but recall how she'd brought back the snake eggs from the imperial territory, how she'd taken care of them day and night, and finally succeeded in hatching the last egg when none of the other 4 eggs had successfully hatched. Lin Qingshan could clearly remember Whitey's adorable and harmless little white head as it broke out of its shell. She carefully cradled Whitey's body, which was only a few inches long, in the center of her palm. Whitey's large, watery eyes had been staring at her ever since it hatched, as if it wanted to remember her forever. Cousin Xiao, stop. Lin Qingshan couldn't help but cry out. At the same time, she tried to struggle free of Yun Ruoyan's grip on her arm. Qingshan. Yun Ruoyan could naturally see Lin Qingshan's reluctance. Have you forgotten how ferocious the serpents were in the imperial territory? You're not a beastmaster and you can't become a summoner. Serpents are high-rank beasts and as they mature, only a summoner can control them. On the Qinyuan continent, a summoner was second only to a pillmaster. However, in order to become a summoner, one had to first become a beastmaster. Only a 7th-rank beastmaster could become a summoner. Beastmasters could only control the beasts they had contracted with, but a top-tier summoner could summon tens of thousands of beasts to fight for them. Of course, no one present had ever seen such a top-tier summoner before. Yun Maxiao's master was only a beginner summoner, and he could only summon a dozen or so low-rank beasts to fight for him. Even so, he was still a formidable presence on the battlefield. Sister Ruoyan, tell Cousin Xiao to stop. Lin Qingshan, on the other hand, didn't seem to hear Yun Ruoyan's words. She, who had always been calm and collected, was clearly agitated. Whitey won't submit, not even if you kill it. By this time, Yun Maxiao had already begun preparing the second formation. Sister Ruoyan, have you forgotten that I have a demonic ring? Lin Qingshan hurriedly raised the ring on her finger. Even if I can't form a contract with Whitey, I can still control it with this ring and it won't hurt me. Yun Ruoyan had seen this demonic ring before, and she had even tried it on herself. She had asked Qiuqiu about the demonic realm, But Xiao didn't seem to want to talk too much about it, so she didn't force it. However, Xiao told her that it wasn't easy to control a demonic artifact. If one's cultivation wasn't high enough and used the artifact frequently, it would be easy to be controlled by the demonic power left behind by the previous owner in the Devil Realm. Xianxia, I was just about to find an opportunity to tell you that you can wear this ring, but you mustn't use it too often. Your cultivation isn't high enough and you'll fall into a demonic trance. While Yun Ruoyan was trying to dissuade Lin Xianxia, Yun Maxiao had already finished his second formation and was about to wave his hand at Whitey. Lin Xianxia suddenly shook off Yun Ruoyan's hand and ran toward Whitey. Xianxia. Yun Ruoyan called out as she saw Lin Xianxia run between Whitey and Yun Maxiao. Yun Maxiao controlled the blood-colored formation to close in on Whitey, but Lin Xianxia's sudden charge prevented him from withdrawing the contract, and the formation struck Lin Xianxia's body. Lin Xianxia waved her hand to block, and the contract formation imprinted itself on her left arm. The formation instantly burned a large hole in her white robe, and then it branded itself onto the flesh of Lin Xianxia's left arm. The pain of the searing iron burning into her flesh caused Yun Ruoyan to break out in a cold sweat. She held her arm and bent down, slowly calling out, "Cousins, stop." Yun Maxiao hadn't expected Lin Xianxia to suddenly run over, and he was stunned for a moment. By the time he reacted, he was quite angry. "Xianxia, what are you doing? Cousin, don't hurt Whitey. It won't submit to you," Lin Xianxia warned. "Do you know how dangerous this is?" Although Yun Maxiao was angry that his beast-taming session had been interrupted, he was even angrier at Lin Xianxia's dangerous behavior. Beast-taming was a battle between the beast-tamer and the beast, and both sides could launch fatal attacks at any moment. Lin Xianxia's actions were indeed too dangerous. "Cousin, don't hurt Whitey anymore," Lin Xianxia continued. Yun Maxiao paused. Only then did he realize that Lin Xianxia was reluctant to part with Whitey. He waved his hand. "Forget it, this dumb snake doesn't just look dumb, it's also dumb. I don't want it anymore." Only then did Lin Xianxia relax and turn around to check on Whitey's injuries. "Whitey, it must hurt a lot." Lin Xianxia stroked the bleeding wound on Whitey's body. The imprint on Whitey's forehead had dimmed as Yun Maxiao retracted his spiritual energy. However, just like Lin Xianxia's arm, the imprint had left a bleeding wound on Whitey's flesh. Lin Xianxia gently caressed the wound on little White's head. At this moment, a stream of blood flowed down her arm, seeping into the diagram on little White's forehead. In an instant, Whitey's eyes became even brighter, and the imprint on its forehead glowed red once more. "Brother, what's going on?" Yun Ruoyan saw the change and hurriedly asked her brother. Yun Maxiao turned around and exclaimed in shock, "It's a blood contract. This snake wants to form a blood contract with Xianxia." Yun Ruoyan and Xiao had indeed formed a blood contract. However, unbeknownst to Yun Ruoyan, her blood had accidentally flowed onto the bracelet, and Xiao had voluntarily formed the contract with Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao walked up to Lin Xianxia and Whitey, their eyes glued to each other. The contract formation above Whitey's head began to change. Although Yun Ruoyan still couldn't understand what was written on it, she could tell that it was even more profound than before. Gradually, the new contract circle that appeared dimmed once again. Even the wound on Whitey's forehead slowly began to heal. At this moment, little White finally closed his eyes and fell asleep. Whitey. Lin Xianxia anxiously shook Whitey's round head. "It'll be fine." At this time, Yun Maxiao, who was standing behind Lin Xianxia, spoke up. "Its injuries are all superficial, so it's not a big deal. The contract formation I left on its forehead has also been absorbed, so it's fine now. Don't worry." Lin Xianxia turned back to Yun Maxiao and nodded. Yun Maxiao continued, "Cousin Xianxia, congratulations on forming a contract with a magical beast. For a cultivator without a talent for summoning, this is a very fortunate thing." Lin Xianxia didn't seem to understand Yun Maxiao's words, so Yun Ruoyan explained to her that Whitey had formed a blood contract with her. Although Lin Xianxia had heard of contracts between humans and magical beasts, she had never personally experienced one, so she didn't have any experience with it. As a result, Lin Xianxia's first reaction wasn't surprise, but confusion. "Why don't I feel anything special?" According to her understanding, shouldn't there be some sort of reaction after forming a contract with a magical beast? However, she didn't feel anything special at all. A Beastmaster's imprint will have a strong binding effect on a magical beast. Once a contract is formed, there'll be a strong reaction, Wuxia replied. But I'm not sure if a magical beast signs a blood contract of its own accord. Although Ruoyan didn't have any theoretical knowledge to guide her on this point, she had personal experience with it. Xianxia, don't worry. Just wait for Whitey to sense you. A blood contract was much more stable than a forceful imprint from a contract. As a magical beast grew stronger and stronger, if the Beastmaster's cultivation couldn't keep up, it was very likely that he wouldn't be able to suppress the beast. In fact, it wasn't the first time that a magical beast would break free of the contract and attack its master. However, such a situation wouldn't occur with a blood contract. A magical beast would choose a master that would protect it for the rest of its life, and the contract would only dissolve on its own if one of them died. As a result, no matter what kind of monster Whitey would become in the future, Ruoyan wasn't worried. Ruoyan helped Lin Xianxia up, and the two of them placed Whitey back into the pool. Although the wounds on its body looked quite serious, they were all superficial wounds that could heal on their own. Although Wuxia hadn't managed to tame Whitey, he had inadvertently helped Lin Xianxia, so he wasn't unhappy about it. Somewhat embarrassed, Lin Xianxia allowed Wuxia to choose one of her beasts to take with him. Wuxia looked around at the strange-looking magical beasts in the bamboo forest. There was a one-eared short-legged demonic pig, a blood-crowned demonic chicken that was missing half of its crown, and a catfish that had an ear-piercing laugh and an even scarier cry. Xianxia, these beasts of yours won't be of much use to me. Wuxia laughed. The beasts had seen Wuxia use his techniques before, and when they heard him say this, they scurried away in fear. Wuxia sighed and joked, forget it. Aside from that white snake, none of your magical beasts are worthy of my attention. It seems that I'll have to put aside my goal of gathering the 3 great magical beasts of the air, sea and land for the time being. That night, Ruoyan sat cross-legged on her bed and entered the bracelet's pocket dimension, beginning her cultivation as a blade master. Ever since her spiritual energy had recovered, Ruoyan was delighted to find that her spiritual vortex had expanded once more, and that it was easier for her to absorb and condense spiritual energy. Even more delightful was that her cultivation as a blade master seemed to be on the verge of breaking through from the peak of 7th rank to 8th rank. Ruoyan had always been secretive about her progress in cultivation. She didn't want to show off in front of unimportant people, nor did she want to gain unimportant fame and praise. She also didn't want the people around her to be so shocked that they'd have to explain how she'd improved so quickly. What she preferred most at the moment was to focus on cultivation and silently accumulate wealth. Chapter 124. After converting a portion of her spiritual energy into a fire attribute, Ruoyan opened her eyes and took a short break. Xiao also woke up from his cultivation and opened his eyes. Xiao, Ruoyan murmured, I still haven't figured out what grandfather told me yesterday. Yesterday, Ruoyan's first attempt at pill making had resulted in an inferior pill. Although she had received everyone's approval, Ruoyan was someone who had high expectations of herself. She asked Lin Zainan why she refined the medicine according to the order and rhythm of his medicine refinement. Even though the cultivation of the two of them were about the same, the spiritual fire that Lin Zainan emitted might not be stronger than hers. But why was it that Lin Zainan's pills were superior grade, while hers were low grade? Lin Zainan's answer was that pill making wasn't a simple imitation, and that one had to put their heart into it. Even now, Ruoyan still didn't understand what Lin Zainan meant by that. I'm clearly already putting in a lot of effort into learning pill making, so why does grandfather say that I'm not putting in the effort? Ruoyan couldn't understand. Xiao had been awake when Ruoyan had been refining pills the day before, so he had been able to understand the situation. Everyone's different, Xiao began. Xiao spoke up. Although you and your grandfather are both 3rd-rank alchemists, his skill is far beyond your reach. You might think that you're refining pills according to his method, but the slightest difference will result in a vastly different outcome. Xiao continued her analysis. Furthermore, stargrass and the same 4 types of spiritual herbs grows in different places and absorbs different amounts of spiritual energy. As a result, Even if you concoct the pills according to your grandfather's formula, it might not be the correct one. Yun Ruoyan suddenly understood. So you're saying that different people have their own methods of refining the same spiritual herb? The methods are more or less the same, but the technique changes depending on the time, place and person, Xiao corrected. Before refining pills, one must first familiarize themselves with the ingredients they're going to refine, and then fully grasp their quality. Then, according to their quality, they can plan how to refine the pill. This is what grandfather meant by attentiveness. I understand. In an instant, Yun Ruoyan's doubts disappeared, leaving her eyes clear and bright. She stood up and went directly to the place where the herbs and alchemy furnace were placed. She picked up the high-grade alchemy furnace and the 4 herbs beside it and returned to Xiao's side. Those 4 herbs were exactly what she needed to concoct the darkened heavens pill. She already had the stargrass in her bracelet's pocket dimension, and the other 3 had been obtained from the Lin family's apothecary in preparation for her pill-making practice. Yun Ruoyan glanced at Xiao, then sat down cross-legged, placed the furnace in front of her, and began to refine another darkened heavens pill. This time, after she lit the furnace, she didn't rush to put the heavens star grass into the furnace. Instead, she held the heavens star grass in her hand and carefully felt the spiritual power contained within it. Then he similarly sensed the spiritual power of the other 3 types of spirit herbs. When he had a sufficient understanding of these 4 types of spirit herbs, he officially began to refine the medicine. First, she dripped a drop of blood from her fingertip into the furnace, allowing it to familiarize itself with her aura. Then she placed the heavens star grass on top of the furnace and began to roast it. This time she didn't follow Lin Zainan's order and rhythm. Instead, she adjusted the spiritual flame according to the changes in aura emitted by the spirit herbs within the flame. The red flame was the warmest flame, suitable for switching between 2 flames. The orange flame was the hottest, and the yellow flame was the hottest of the 3. This time Yun Ruoyan had completely forgotten how Lin Zainan had manipulated the spiritual flame. Instead, she controlled the flames according to her own intuition and the changes in the spirit herbs within the flame. After a few attempts where the temperature of the flames was too high and the ingredients were burnt to a paste, Yun Ruoyan finally figured out a way to refine her second darkened heavens pill. Yun Ruoyan handed the pill to Xiao, which picked it up with its 2 tiny paws. After a careful examination, its evaluation was that it wasn't perfect. The color was passable, but the smell wasn't strong enough. Improvement. Xiao noticed that Yun Ruoyan didn't seem happy after hearing its evaluation. Although Master's first attempt at concocting medicine was a simple imitation, it's already very good that it can still take shape. Given that you managed to refine a second good-grade spiritual medicine in just a few hours, I'm afraid that your gift in alchemy has surpassed your grandfather's. Afraid that Yun Ruoyan would rush things, Xiao reminded her. At this rate of cultivation, you'll definitely surpass your grandfather within 2 years, but you can't rush things. I also know that we can't rush it. Yun Ruoyan looked at the high-grade furnace in her hands. But 2 years from now I'll have a duel with Wang Meng. If I lose, he'll definitely challenge grandfather again. Grandfather's body and cultivation are both far from what they used to be, and that's what I'm most worried about. The more worried, afraid, and anxious they were, the more they couldn't panic or rush things. Yun Ruoyan understood this, but rationality often couldn't suppress her emotions. Xiao's heart ached when it saw Yun Ruoyan's frown. Mistress, you don't have to worry too much. As long as you're a 5th-rank pill master, I'll teach you how to refine poisons from domination of the heavens. If you can't defeat Wang Meng, I'll poison him to death and I'll make sure he doesn't harm your family. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but laugh at Xiao's words. Even though it sounded quite shameless, she felt an inexplicable warmth in her heart. The next day, Yun Maxiao arrived at her cottage early in the morning to fetch Yun Ruoyan to the Lin Manor. Today they were going to visit the annual autumn market with the Lin sisters. The market was crowded and lively, and the sounds of hawkers and chatter filled the air. 2 people walking side by side chatted with each other so loud that it was hard to hear what the other was saying. Yun Ruoyan, Yun Maxiao, Lin Qingchen and Lin Xianxia finally squeezed through the most crowded part of the city and arrived at a slightly less crowded area. Lin Qingchen placed all the bags in her hands on the ground and said to the empty-handed Lin Xianxia, "These are all your things. How can you not take a single one of them? Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao's hands were also full of all sorts of food and trinkets, and they all looked at the empty-handed Lin Qingxue. Because I have to pick out things and carrying things in my hands will block my line of sight. Lin Qingxue replied matter-of-factly. My dear sister, it's rare that you're going shopping with me once a year, so please don't take such a small matter to heart, all right? Lin Qingchen was speechless once more. The three of them were going to die of exhaustion just by accompanying one person. If not for the fact that she spent all her time in the bamboo garden or at the apothecary, Lin Qingxue wouldn't have been able to catch a glimpse of her. Qingxue, is there anything else you'd like to buy? Yun Maxiao smiled. Lin Qingchen immediately shot a look at Yun Maxiao, telling him to shut up. If he bought anything else, who was going to carry it? All right, I'll take a look, Lin Qingxue replied bluntly. Lin Qingchen stared at the sky, speechless. Ruoyan, is there anything you'd like to buy? Yun Maxiao asked. Yun Ruoyan shook her head. She hadn't been idling along the way looking for any stalls that sold medicinal herbs. Qiuqiu had asked her to prepare some ingredients for poison, and all she could think of right now was thundervine, white frost grass, red-tailed centipedes and the like. Before she got her hands on those ingredients, she didn't have time to think about anything else. But after looking around, there were quite a few stalls selling spiritual herbs, but not a single one selling poisonous herbs. Brother, do you know of any places in the capital that sell ingredients for poison? Yun Ruoyan asked her brother in a small voice. Yun Maxiao shook his head. He was even less familiar with the capital than Yun Ruoyan was, and Yun Ruoyan was just trying anything in her desperation. Why do you want to buy ingredients? Yun Maxiao asked. Nothing, I'm just curious, Yun Ruoyan replied casually. Ruoyan. Yun Maxiao's expression turned serious. A pillmaster's talent is very precious and you must cherish it. Don't go down the wrong path and hurt grandfather's feelings. There was a group of people on the Qinyuan continent who possessed talent as a pillmaster, but for various reasons chose to go down the path of poison. Poison greatly increased their strength and caused others to fear them. As a result, their reputation became unbearably bad. As a result, the so-called righteous cultivators of the Qinyuan continent scoffed at these poisoners, saying that they had gone down the wrong path. But Yun Ruoyan, who had been reborn, had a different view of the path of poison. Whether it was in her past life or in this one, she had been plagued by poison, and none of the people who had poisoned her had been poisoners. Of the 10 evildoers of the Qinyuan continent, only one was a poisoner, and he wasn't one of the most notorious. As a result, poisoners didn't necessarily have to be vicious and murderous, but there were many who were vicious and plotted to harm others, making it difficult to guard against them. In Yun Ruoyan's view, if this skill could make her stronger, and if she could protect herself from harm without killing the innocent, then it wouldn't be a bad path. If she could master the ability to concoct antidotes, then that would be even better. This thought only strengthened Yun Ruoyan's resolve to learn how to concoct poisons. Yun Ruoyan knew that her words wouldn't work with Yun Maxiao, so she laughed awkwardly. Oh, I know. I'm just constantly being poisoned by others, so I'm trying to find some ingredients to concoct poisons to familiarize myself with their smell. Perhaps I'll be able to identify them the next time someone tries to harm me with poison. Silly sister, it's not that easy to identify a refined poison, Yun Maxiao said with a smile. Yun Ruoyan had originally wanted to ask Lin Qingchen where she could purchase the ingredients, but seeing Yun Maxiao's attitude, she gave up. Lin Qingchen's thoughts were even more orthodox than Yun Maxiao's, and she wasn't as easy to fool as Yun Maxiao. It seemed like she'd have to slowly ask around on her own. Yun Ruoyan murmured to herself. Catch the thief, catch the thief. Suddenly Lin Qingxue's voice rang out. Brothers and sisters, come quickly. My purse has been stolen. Chapter 125. Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao piled up all the items in their hands in front of Lin Qingchen. Qingchen, look after the items. We're going to catch the thief, Yun Ruoyan instructed before following Yun Maxiao in the direction that Lin Qingxue had called out to. Catch the thief, catch the thief. Don't let the thief get away. Lin Qingxue yelled as she chased. From afar, Yun Ruoyan could see that the already packed crowd in front of her had become a chaotic mess. Lin Qingxue had used her spiritual energy to chase after the thief, and many of the stalls had been knocked over. Some commoners had been caught in the shockwave and were lying on the ground moaning in pain. Xianxia, don't hurt anyone. Yun Maxiao called out. Yun Ruoyan watched as a yellow sword aura appeared beneath Yun Maxiao's feet, and he leapt into the air. Ruoyan, give me your hand. Standing on the sword aura, Yun Maxiao turned around and extended a hand toward Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan pulled on Yun Maxiao's hand and leapt onto the sword aura. She held onto Yun Maxiao's waist to steady herself, and Yun Maxiao flew toward Lin Qingxue. Over there. Yun Ruoyan spotted Lin Qingchen in front of a restaurant not far away. She was talking to a youth whose back Yun Ruoyan recognized. Yun Maxiao directed the sword aura to land in front of Lin Qingxue, and Yun Ruoyan immediately recognized the youth as Zhou Yifeng, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. In his hands was a skinny, monkey-like man, most likely the thief. Sister Ruoyan, look. I've bumped into Brother Zhou. Lin Qingxue jumped up happily, waving a red pouch in her hand. Brother Zhou helped me catch the thief and get my pouch back. Yun Ruoyan looked at Zhou Yifeng. He was dressed in coarse clothes and he was darker and thinner than he had been in the imperial territory. His eyes were still bright and he hadn't changed much. When Zhou Yifeng saw Yun Ruoyan, he was stunned. When they had parted, the poison in Yun Ruoyan's body hadn't yet been purged, and her complexion and condition were far from what they were now. At the time, Yun Ruoyan was dressed in red, and the birthmark on her face was only partially covered by her hair. Yun Ruoyan, on the other hand, was wearing a light yellow chiffon dress. Her hair was tied into two simple buns on each side, and two strands of soft, silky hair hung by her ears. The birthmark on the right side of her face was covered by a peach blossom veil. The exposed cheek was as delicate as a peach blossom. She had the image of a beautiful, delicate little girl. In less than 3 months, whether in terms of appearance or temperament, Yun Ruoyan had undergone a 360-degree reversal. The Lin sisters would meet with Yun Ruoyan from time to time, and they had witnessed the changes that had taken place in Yun Ruoyan's life. When Yun Maxiao first saw Yun Ruoyan, he was pleasantly surprised but not shocked. Only Zhou Yifeng found it difficult to merge the two images in his mind. Zhou Yifeng, where's your sister? Zhou Yifeng was still in shock and did not answer. Brother Zhou, this is Sister Ruoyan. I don't recognize her. Seeing Zhou Yifeng's dazed expression, Lin Qingchen tugged on his sleeve. Only then did Zhou Yifeng react. He scratched his head awkwardly, not knowing what to say. Brother Zhou, where's Lin? Why don't I see her? Lin Qingxue repeated Yun Ruoyan's question, looking around for Zhou. Lin is at the inn, Zhou Yifeng replied. I'm out to get some medicine, so I have to return immediately. What should we do with this thief? Zhou Yifeng asked. Leave it to me. Yun Maxiao stepped forward. This is my brother Yun Maxiao, Yun Ruoyan introduced. Yun Ruoyan introduced him. This is a friend we made in the imperial territory, Zhou Yifeng. Seeing that Yun Maxiao's aura was extraordinary, and that his cultivation was much higher than his own, Zhou Yifeng handed the thief over to Yun Maxiao without hesitation. Yun Maxiao had been in the army since he was a child and he had a good eye for people. He saw that Zhou Yifeng's eyes were bright, and although he didn't speak much, he gave off a clear and bright aura. I have to return to the inn. I'll be worried if I don't see Lin soon. Zhou Yifeng bent down to pick up a medicine pouch from the ground. Which inn are you staying at? I'll go with you. Lin Qingxue grabbed Zhou Yifeng's arm. I haven't seen Lin in a long time and I miss her a lot, hee. Seeing that Lin Qingxue was adamant about following Zhou Yifeng, Yun Ruoyan also wanted to see where Zhou Yifeng and the others were staying. Yun Maxiao felt that it would be too cumbersome to bring the thief along, and it would be too troublesome to escort him to the authorities, so he kicked the thief and let him go. Having been kicked so hard by Yun Maxiao that the thief was afraid that they would change their minds and try to arrest him again, he scrambled away. Yun Ruoyan's gaze landed on the thief's back, which was as thin as a monkey's. Coincidentally, he was looking back at them. Yun Ruoyan saw that the thief had a pair of beady eyes, a sharp mouth and a pair of protruding ears. His yellowish hair was balding and the rest of his hair was loose. She suddenly thought of someone, but before she could confirm it further, the skinny monkey turned a corner and disappeared. Ruoyan, what's the matter? Yun Maxiao asked when he saw Yun Ruoyan in a daze. Yun Ruoyan shook her head. Yun Maxiao was just about to fly off to fetch Lin Qingchen when he saw her walking quickly toward them. Sister, why are you empty-handed? Where's my stuff? Lin Xianxia asked when she saw that Lin Qingqian's hands were empty. I left them at a store and I'll have a servant retrieve them when we get home, Lin Qingqian replied. Lin Qingqian was also surprised to see Zhou Yifeng. Zhou Yifeng had left quite a few things with her and she could finally return them to their rightful owner. After a few words, the group followed Zhou Yifeng to the inn where he and Zhou Lin were staying. In the restaurant, Li Mo, dressed in a black robe, was sipping tea by the window, his gaze fixed on the figure in the yellow dress who was slowly disappearing into the distance. That's the first young master of the Yun family. Li Qianhan pointed at Yun Moxiao's back. Yun Ruoyan had saved Li Mo, and in return for her kindness, Li Mo had promised her a favor: to ensure Yun Moxiao's safety for the next 3 years. Li Mo placed his teacup on the table. Prepare a detailed profile of Yun Moxiao for me. I'll need it as soon as I get back to the manor. Su Bei, who was standing behind Li Mo, nodded and went downstairs. Although the siblings didn't grow up together, they seemed to be quite close. Li Qianhan looked at their backs. Yun Moxiao had been walking by Yun Ruoyan's side the entire time, a step behind as if he were protecting her. When Li Mo thought back to how Yun Moxiao had carried Yun Ruoyan on his sword, he couldn't help but feel a little displeased. He had flown so high with Yun Ruoyan on his sword, but Yun Ruoyan had stubbornly straightened her back and refused to lean against him. Yun Moxiao had only flown a little high, but Yun Ruoyan had hugged his waist so tightly. Was this really necessary? When Yun Ruoyan and the others heard Zhou Yifeng say that they were staying at an inn, they thought that they would be staying in a guest room. Unexpectedly, Zhou Yifeng had brought them to a woodshed. The woodshed was very simple with nothing but a bed. Zhou Lin was lying on the bed, her already frail body seeming even more frail than before. Lin we're here to see you, Lin Qingxue called out to Zhou Lin. Qingxue. Zhou Lin didn't expect Lin Qingxue to suddenly appear, and her tone was pleasantly surprised. When she saw Lin Qingqian and Yun Ruoyan, she smiled. Sister Qingqian, Sister Ruoyan, why are you here? We bumped into each other on the road, Lin Qingxue replied. Lin Qingxue replied, my money pouch was stolen. Fortunately, Brother Zhou helped me catch the thief. Zhou Lin wanted to speak, but as soon as she opened her mouth, she started coughing. Lin you're sick. Lin Qingxue looked at Zhou Lin with concern. Is it serious? When Lin Qingxue and Zhou Lin first met, they didn't like each other, but gradually they became good friends. After parting at Kongming Mountain, they hadn't seen each other for more than 2 months, but they didn't feel estranged from each other. It's nothing serious, just a little cold. My body's weak and it looks serious, Zhou Lin replied. Don't worry, my sister's a miraculous physician. With her by your side you'll get better very quickly. Lin Qingxue turned to Lin Qingqian, who motioned for her to step aside. Lin Qingxue hurriedly stepped aside, and Lin Qingqian took Zhou Lin's pulse. Indeed, it was just a cold, but Zhou Lin's body was weak and she needed time to recuperate. When did you come to the capital and why are you living in a place like this? Yun Ruoyan turned to him. She had heard from Zhou Yifeng that they lived in the outlying city, about 800 miles from the capital. He had once saved an old man while hunting in the mountains, and it was that old man who had given them a spot to enter the imperial territory. At the time, Zhou Yifeng had hurriedly left with Zhou Lin to inform the old man. Now they did not know how they had fallen to the point of living in a woodshed. More than half a month, Zhou Yifeng replied. Zhou Yifeng replied, we still have some money on hand, but we need identification to stay in the city. Lin and I don't have any, so it wasn't easy to find this inn that was willing to let us stay in the woodshed. As it turned out, there had been many incidents of demons attacking humans in the city in recent years. As a result, the government had issued identification to the city's residents. Only with identification could one remain in the city for long periods of time, or one would have to leave the city. Zhou Yifeng and Zhou Lin's identities were special, and it wasn't easy to obtain identification. Why didn't you look for us when you came here? Lin Qingxue asked. We did, Zhou Lin replied from her bed. Zhou Lin, who was lying on the bed, said, but the imperial city is too big and there are too many aristocratic families. We can't find a clue right now. In fact, Zhou Yifeng had found the Yun household, but he couldn't enter the Yun manor. At the time, Lin Zainan was in seclusion, and in order to prevent anyone from disturbing them, the Lin manor's gates were tightly shut. There's still half a month before the start of Kongming Academy's term. Why are you here so soon? Zhou Yifeng was silent for a moment. I accidentally overheard a secret and I escaped with Lin overnight. Chapter 126. They'd escaped because they'd overheard a secret. Although they were curious as to what secret Zhou Yifeng had overheard, none of them dared to ask about it. What secret? Lin Qingxue, on the other hand, was more curious than anything else, and she asked directly. Zhou Yifeng's gaze swept over the group as if hesitating about something. Yun Ruoyan and the Lin sisters were friends who had gone through thick and thin with him, and they were the only human friends he had outside of his own clan. Of everyone present, Yun Maxiao was the only one he wasn't familiar with. If it's inconvenient, I can avoid it, Yun Maxiao said, seeing through Zhou Yifeng's concerns. Brother, Yun Ruoyan turned to her brother, I won't hide anything from you. Yun Ruoyan turned back to Zhou Yifeng. If it's inconvenient for you to say it, then forget it. Zhou Yifeng frowned, hesitating only for a moment before saying, this secret is truly important, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to keep it to myself. Perhaps if I told you, we might be able to come up with some ideas. However, this secret can't be spread, and I can't let anyone else know that I was the one who leaked it, or the two of us will be in danger. The group could tell from Zhou Yifeng's words how important this secret was, and their hearts were filled with both curiosity and solemnity. Brother Zhou, what secret is it that's so serious? Lin Qingxue asked. Zhou Yifeng walked to the door and looked around. After confirming that there was no one nearby, he closed the door and turned around to look at the crowd. Only then did he say, the secret I heard is that someone wants to rebel. What did you say? Yun Maxiao stood up from his wooden chair, his expression and tone both shocked. Someone's planning to rebel. He was from the army, and although he was young, he was already a vice-general. As a general, matters of national importance were especially sensitive to him. Yes, Zhou Yifeng confirmed. They're indeed planning to rebel, and they've been planning this for many years. It's not a spur-of-the-moment idea. Zhou Lin lay on her bed silent. She was likely aware of this secret as well. Both Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxue were stunned. The word rebellion had never appeared in their minds before. It had been more than 500 years since the founding of the Li Kingdom. Aside from a few times when the crown prince seized power, the kingdom was generally peaceful. 100 or 200 years ago, before the Qin and Mo kingdoms had been established, the northeastern region was home to many different races and small kingdoms. However, with the establishment and submission of the Qin and Mo kingdoms, and the establishment of the Li Kingdom, the Qinyuan continent was more or less at peace. In the past 100 years, the only war that had taken place had been between the human race and the beastkin 10 years ago. In less than 2 years, Li Mo had managed to suppress the beastkin with his swift and decisive methods. If Li Mo had anything to do with the beastkin, why would he use such bloody methods to suppress his own kind? If Li Mo wasn't a beastkin, why would the demons and beasts in the Forest of Dead Souls worship him as the Beast King? Li Mo was probably the only person in the world who would be able to answer her questions. Let's put this matter aside. At this moment, Zhuozhu's declaration of rebellion had undoubtedly stirred up waves of shock in their hearts. Who's rebelling? Yun Maxiao asked solemnly. Zhou Yifeng was silent for a moment before replying, the far-sighted king Li Sheng. The far-sighted king? Li Sheng? How could it be him? Yun Maxiao was shocked and surprised to hear the name. The far-sighted king was the eldest brother of the current emperor. He was already more than 50 years old, and was a renowned sage as well as a master forge master. Even the generals were proud to own a weapon forged by the far-sighted king himself. How could he possibly rebel? In the Li Kingdom, although the far-sighted king Li Sheng's reputation wasn't as great as the slaughtering king Li Mo's, it was still a good one. In times of disaster, the far-sighted king would open up the granaries and slaughter bandits with his retainers. At the beginning of this year, Yun Maxiao's army had even received a batch of weapons from the far-sighted king. The few cities under the far-sighted king's rule were all quite prosperous. If he were to rebel, the Li Kingdom would truly be overturned. Zhou Yifeng, this is truly a serious matter, Yun Ruoyan began. Are you sure you saw it with your own eyes and heard it with your own ears? Brother Zhou, how did you know the far-sighted king? Lin Qingxue asked. Of course I'm sure. Zhou Yifeng's gaze swept across the crowd once more. Seeing that none of them dared believe his words, he began to explain how he had met the far-sighted king, as well as the details of how he had heard this secret. As it turned out, the far-sighted king that Zhou Yifeng had rescued from the jaws of a few ferocious beasts a year ago was none other than the far-sighted king himself. The far-sighted king's cultivation was quite high, and logically speaking, he shouldn't have been surrounded by a few ferocious beasts. However, for some reason, the far-sighted king was unable to use his cultivation. In the nick of time, Zhou Yifeng had suddenly appeared and rescued him from the claws of the ferocious beasts. Afterwards, when Li Xing learned of Zhou Yifeng's status as a beastkin as well as his and his sister's plight, he offered to have Zhou Yifeng enter the far-sighted king's manor as a guest. Zhou Yifeng didn't want to live under someone else's roof, so he refused, only accepting the far-sighted king's invitation to work at his manor. A few months ago, the far-sighted king's manor held a martial arts tournament. It was announced that the far-sighted king had no heirs, but he didn't want to waste any slots. As a result, the purpose of the tournament was to allow those who had the ability to enter the imperial territory. Zhou Yifeng had come out on top in the tournament, and because he had saved the far-sighted king's life, Li Xing had made an exception and given him 2 slots. This was how Zhou Yifeng had brought Zhuo Lin into the imperial territory. After leaving the imperial territory, Zhou Yifeng was very grateful to the far-sighted king, and he brought Zhuo Lin back to the far-sighted king's manor to thank him in person. Li Xing was also very happy, and he even held a celebratory feast for Zhou Yifeng. During the feast, the far-sighted king once again extended an invitation to Zhou Yifeng, hoping that he would be able to work for him after he graduated from Kongming Academy. In gratitude for the far-sighted king's recognition, Zhou Yifeng accepted the invitation. From then on, Zhou Yifeng and Zhuo Lin stayed at the far-sighted king's manor. Everything had been progressing in a good direction, but on a rainy night half a month ago, Zhou Yifeng had just finished patrolling the manor and was on his way back to his own courtyard when he suddenly saw a shadowy figure. The shadowy figure was extremely ghostly, as if it had melded into the darkness of the night and was extremely difficult to detect. However, Zhou Yifeng's unique senses as a beastkin allowed him to detect the shadowy figure's movements. An expert who was adept at concealment like this would be impossible to capture if he was even slightly alarmed. As a result, Zhou Yifeng silently followed the shadowy figure into the rear courtyard, where the patriarch of the manor lived. The shadowy figure eventually entered Li Xing's study. At that time, Li Xing's study was lit, indicating that someone was inside. Zhou Yifeng had thought that the shadowy figure would do something to Li Xing, so he had followed the shadowy figure to the door, ready to rush in at any moment. However, he hadn't expected to hear the sounds of conversation from within the room. Clearly the 2 figures knew each other. Zhou Yifeng heaved a sigh of relief and was just about to leave when he suddenly heard his name being mentioned in their conversation. He couldn't help but stop in his tracks. He couldn't help but press his ear against the tightly shut door, and with his acute hearing he could hear the 2 figures conversing softly. "We've already planted our spies throughout the Li Kingdom, including the Imperial Palace," a hoarse, unfamiliar voice said. "It's just that Kongming Academy is like an impenetrable fortress, and I'm unable to place any of my subordinates there." "That's fine, I've already made plans." Li Xing turned to the shadowy figure. "I have a beastkin brat named Zhou Yifeng who passed Kongming Academy's entrance exam. He'll be entering Kongming Academy in a few days. Is that brat reliable?" The shadowy figure asked. "We've been working on this project for more than 10 years, so we have to be extremely careful. I've already thoroughly investigated his background," Li Xing replied. "He has no parents and is separated from his clan. All he has left is his little sister, and she is his Achilles heel. As long as I can grasp his Achilles heel, I don't have to worry that he won't help me." "Your Highness is wise," the shadowy figure laughed sinisterly. "Your Highness, it's only a matter of time before you reclaim your throne. I've waited for more than 20 years, and after more than 10 years of planning, I'm finally about to reclaim what belongs to me." Li Xing suppressed his voice, but he couldn't suppress his greed and resentment towards fate. "The throne of the Li Kingdom should have belonged to me in the first place, but father just had to favor third brother. When I reclaim my throne, I'll definitely change this ear-piercing name of the kingdom. Hearing this, Zhou Yifeng finally understood that this virtuous king, who was praised by the people, actually had such wild ambitions. What made him even more uneasy was that Li Xing had always been cultivating him as a pawn, and his sister had become a tool that Li Xing could use to control him. He returned to his own residence in the far-sighted king's manor, filled with shock and unease. After a brief discussion with Zhuo Lin, the two of them packed up their belongings and fled the capital that very night. Zhuo Lin had caught a cold in the rain that night, and she had remained ill to this day. As they listened to Zhou Yifeng's account, they fell silent for a long time. Li Xing's status was far too special. He was the eldest son of the previous emperor, and the older brother of the current emperor. Even Li Mo had to address him respectfully. In the Li kingdom, where seniority was highly valued, he was the most senior. Without concrete evidence, accusing him of treason would be tantamount to suicide. This was also why Zhou Yifeng didn't dare to reveal this secret to the public. Her best course of action was to inform Emperor Li Xiu of this news, so that he could take precautions in advance. However, Li Xiu and Li Xing had always been on good terms. Even if she told him, the emperor might not believe her, and he might even be charged with sowing discord. For a moment, no one had a plan. "Let's go home and tell grandfather about this and see what he has to say," Lin Qingshan suggested. Chapter 127. This matter was far too serious to be resolved by the few of them. Going home and telling her parents was their best option. After some discussion, Yun Maxiao and Yun Ruoyan decided not to tell Yun Lan about the matter for now, because it would definitely draw Zhou Yifeng out. In order to protect the Zhou siblings, they decided to keep the secret to Lin Zainan and see what he would say. Lin Qingshan specifically placed a curse on Lin Qingxue, telling her to keep her mouth shut and keep the secret to herself. Lin Qingxue also solemnly declared that this matter concerned Zhou Yifeng's life, and that she would never divulge it. After the discussion, they prepared to return to the Lin manor. Lin Qingshan wrote down a prescription and handed it to Lin Qingxue, instructing her to go to the apothecary to get the herbs. Although the Lins had quite a few spiritual herbs that could nourish the body and expel the cold, Zhuo Lin's body was too weak to withstand such a large amount of spiritual energy. "Brother Zhuo." Lin Qingshan turned to Zhou Yifeng. "The conditions here are too poor for Lin Er's recovery. If you don't mind, why don't you come to the Lin manor?" "That's right, that's exactly what I was thinking." Lin Qingxue was just about to leave with the prescription in her hand when she heard Lin Qingshan's words. Zhou Yifeng didn't like living under someone else's roof, so he was torn between his sister's illness and his own wishes. Zhuo Lin lowered her head and didn't say a word. She had always listened to her brother on these matters, and neither would she complain nor make any requests. "All right, it's settled then." Yun Ruoyan didn't give Zhou Yifeng any time to think, and she immediately began making arrangements. "Brother," Yun Ruoyan called out to her brother. "Go rent a carriage from the streets and we'll take Lin to the Lin manor right away." "Qingxue, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and get the herbs." Yun Ruoyan called out to Lin Qingxue, who was still standing by the door. All right, I'll go right away." Lin Qingxue skipped away happily. Yun Maxiao followed her out to rent a carriage. "You suddenly escaped from the far-sighted king's manor with Lin. Even if you hadn't been caught eavesdropping that day, the far-sighted king would still be suspicious of you. I'm afraid that the people he sent to find you are already in the capital. With Wisdom King's ability, it's only a matter of time before he finds you. Coming with us to the Lin family is also a form of protection for you." Zhou Yifeng nodded and turned to Lin Qingshan. "I can do a lot of things. Can you give me a job?" "Sure." Lin Qingshan said straightforwardly, "I happen to be lacking someone to look after my magical beasts. You're the most suitable person for this job." It didn't take long before Yun Maxiao rented a car and paid the bill for them at the counter. Yun Maxiao thought that he would have to pay more, but to his surprise, the shopkeeper gave him more than a tael of silver after he finished calculating the bill. It turned out that during this period of time, Zhou Yifeng had always been out hunting to sell to the inn. The money he earned from selling the game not only covered the cost of food and lodging for the siblings, but there was also a surplus. As Yun Maxiao looked at the silver in his hand, his admiration for Zhou Yifeng deepened. He had already learned from the crowd that Zhou Yifeng was a beastkin, and that the human race's persecution of beastkin descendants had eased considerably in the past few years. However, beastkin were still quite discriminated against on the Qinyuan continent. No matter how much they contributed to the army, they couldn't be promoted. Even if they were 5th-rank blade masters and above, they could only obtain legal status as slaves for the larger families. There weren't many beastkin like Zhou Yifeng and Lin Qingchen who were able to conceal their identities and survive on their own. Yun Maxiao handed the silver to Zhou Yifeng, but Zhou Yifeng didn't take it, saying that it was money for the carriage. Without another word, Yun Maxiao stuffed the silver fragments into his pouch. I still have quite a few of your treasures with me, Lin Qingchen replied. It's about time I return them to their rightful owners. After making arrangements for Zhuo Lin, the group went to Lin Zainin's study, where Yun Maxiao recounted the events that had transpired. Lin Zainin sat in his chair silent for a long while. This is an important matter that can't be delayed. I'm not a member of the imperial court, so I'll have to tell your father about it. Yun Ruoyan shared her concerns with Lin Zainin, who replied, Now that your friend's involved in this matter, I'm afraid he won't be able to escape unscathed. For the time being, keep his identity a secret. Once Kongming Academy reopens and the two of you enter, your safety will be guaranteed. Kongming Academy was above the Four Kingdoms. Although it was located within the borders of the Li Kingdom, the Li Kingdom couldn't influence it, and Kongming Academy didn't participate in political struggles. As long as Zhou Yifeng and Zhuo Lin entered Kongming Academy at the end of the month, no one would be able to threaten their safety. With Zhou Yifeng's approval, the group decided that Yun Maxiao would return to the Yun Manor to inform Yun Lan of the matter. As night fell, Yun Lan was in the middle of his work when Yun Maxiao knocked on his study door. Yun Lan frowned. He didn't like to be disturbed when he was working, but he was still surprised to see who it was. On the day that Yun Maxiao had returned home, he had immediately gone to look for Yun Ruoyan. The two of them had gotten into a fight over Yun Ruoyan in the main hall, and they had parted on bad terms. After that, they had met again in the Fong residence. This was the 4th time that the two of them had met. Is it time for your holiday? Yun Lan put down the pen in his hand and asked. He thought that Yun Maxiao had come to bid farewell. Not yet. Yun Maxiao didn't intend to tell his father that he wasn't returning to the army. There's no war at the borders and I haven't had a vacation in many years. I should be able to personally send Ruoyan to Kongming Academy. Yun Lan nodded and didn't say anything else. He picked up his brush and continued reading the documents. Father, Yun Maxiao called out. Is there anything else? Yun Lan didn't even raise his head. Yun Maxiao walked up and placed his hands on Yun Lan's desk. I have something important to tell you, father. Yun Lan frowned, raising his head to look at his father seriously. Yun Maxiao didn't beat around the bush and immediately told his father about this important matter. Yun Lan was so shocked that he couldn't speak for a long time. Impossible. This was the first thing that came out of Yun Lan's mouth. Father, I didn't think it was possible at first either. The far-sighted king is known as the virtuous king and no one would believe that he would rebel. However, it's better to be cautious, Yun Maxiao said. Yun Lan clasped his hands together as he looked at his father. Did you know that the previous emperor intended to pass the throne to the far-sighted king? However, the far-sighted king refused in front of a number of important officials, so the throne was passed to the 3rd prince, the current emperor. If you tell me now that the far-sighted king is rebelling, even the emperor wouldn't believe you. Yun Lan's words made Yun Maxiao even more confused. The far-sighted king voluntarily relinquished his right to the throne? He frowned at his father. Are you certain? Yun Lan nodded once more. This is a secret of the imperial family. Apart from the emperor and the far-sighted king himself, there were 6 other people present. Only these 8 people knew about this secret and I happened to be working for your grandfather at the time, so I was one of them. If the far-sighted king had voluntarily relinquished his right to the throne, then Zhou Yifeng's claim that the far-sighted king had coveted the throne for the past 20 years and spent more than a decade plotting a rebellion couldn't be true. Could it be that Zhou Yifeng was lying? But it didn't seem like it. Moreover, why would he make up such a lie? Yun Maxiao left the bamboo cottage with all sorts of questions in his mind. He turned and headed for Yun Ruoyan's cottage, intending to discuss the matter. Because he was using his spiritual energy, it was as if he was walking on wind. Soon he arrived at the entrance of Yun Ruoyan's cottage. Just as he was about to knock on the door, Yun Maxiao suddenly sensed an unfamiliar aura not far from him. Based on his previous experience of chasing that shadowy figure, Yun Maxiao didn't call out to it. Instead, he pretended to have a stomachache and wanted to relieve himself as he walked toward the source of the aura. The source of the aura was a row of tall trees not far from the main entrance of Yun Ruoyan's cottage. As Yun Maxiao walked over, he put his hand on his belt and pretended to undo his pants. Just as he was about to reach the source of the aura, a yellow sword aura suddenly appeared beneath his feet. In the blink of an eye, he had reached the crown of one of the trees and pulled out a figure. The figure still had some spiritual energy and tried to resist, but Yun Maxiao grabbed the figure's fist with one hand and used the other to tap on the man's meridian, sealing his spiritual energy. Ah! The figure screamed as Yun Maxiao threw him into the courtyard of Yun Ruoyan's cottage. At the same time, the doors to 3 rooms in Yun Ruoyan's cottage opened, and Yun Ruoyan and her 3 maids walked out. "What, were you prepared for this?" Yun Maxiao asked. "Yes, young master," Peony replied. "The mistress sensed an unfamiliar aura around the courtyard a long time ago, and we've been on our guard these past few days. The mistress told us to keep quiet and do what we needed to do, but that fellow only grew bolder and bolder. At first he only lingered in the distance, but he's gotten closer and closer these past few days," Xilan added. Ling Lan lowered her head and whispered, "This servant was just preparing to dig a dog hole in the corner of the wall tomorrow for him to crawl through, so that he won't be able to return. I didn't expect eldest young master to capture him so quickly. This has saved this servant a lot of trouble." Yun Maxiao laughed heartily at Ling Lan's amusing words. "Run, your 3 maids are truly strange, much better than the blockheads in my courtyard." Yun Ruoyan smiled as her gaze landed on the figure kneeling on the ground, clutching his face. "Bring me a brighter lantern. I'd like to see what this little thief is up to." After spying on her for so many days, Yun Ruoyan suspected that he had been sent by Madame N. It seemed that Madame N was truly anxious to the point of resorting to such a foolish method. "Tomorrow I'll bring this little thief to my grandmother's place to complain. Let's see who'll be able to protect you then." Here Mississippi Xilan brought the lantern over. Yun Ruoyan took it and brought it closer to the figure. The figure was kneeling on the ground, his face covered. He wore a dark green robe and a jade crown of the same color, and his back looked quite familiar to Yun Ruoyan. "Show me your face." Yun Maxiao grabbed the back of the man's neck and turned him around. "Why are you here?" Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao exclaimed at the same time. Chapter 128. When the crowd saw the face that Yun Maxiao had forcefully turned toward them, they all froze in shock. This fellow was none other than the young master of the Yun family's second branch, Yun Feng's only son Yun Muin. "Second young master, how could it be you?" Peony and Xilan exclaimed in unison, both of them surprised. The last time the two of them had interacted with Yun Muin was a few months ago, when he had followed Yun Ruoyao and the others to her quarters to cause trouble. At the time, if not for Yun Ruoyan's interference, Xilan and Peony would have been taught a lesson by Yun Muin. His domineering and arrogant demeanor had left a deep impression on the 2 girls. Ling Lan had always been a lowly servant, and Yun Muin was often away from home, so she wasn't familiar with him. However, when she heard Peony and Xilan call him second young master, she couldn't help but wonder why the second young master of the Yun family had come to their quarters in the middle of the night. Their quarters were probably the poorest in the entire Yun family, but there were plenty of treasures to steal. Yun Muin didn't make a sound, only covering his face with his hands. Yun Maxiao grabbed Yun Muiyuan's hands and forced him to reveal his face once more. He frowned and shouted, "What are you trying to do by hiding in the tree outside my quarters in the middle of the night?" Yun Maxiao hadn't grown up in the Yun family, and he hadn't had much interaction with his brothers in the family. However, he did have some impression of this Yun Muin. The 2 of them had crossed paths 4 years ago. At that time, Yun Muin had bullied Yun Ruoyan and had been beaten up by him. Who would have thought that after 4 years, the brat would fall into his hands again? Yun Ruoyan's heart was filled with suspicion. When had Yun Muin become Madame Anne's lackey? That shouldn't be the case, right? Although Yun Moyan was close to Yun Ruoyao, Yun Ruoyu and Yi Qianying, he didn't have to be a spy for them in the middle of the night. What did Madame An promise you to spy on me? Yun Ruoyan's expression was as cold as her eyes. When Yun Moyuan met Yun Ruoyan's gaze, he immediately looked away. His face alternated between red and white and his teeth were clenched tightly. Speak. Yun Maxiao saw that he was pretending to be mute and instantly lost his patience. He raised his fist and was about to hit him. If you don't make a sound, I'll beat you until you can't get out of bed for half a year. Yun Moyuan's memory of Yun Maxiao's fists was still fresh. Yun Moyan was a 4th-rank blade master and he'd already lost to Yun Ruoyan a few months ago, let alone an 8th-rank blade master like Yun Maxiao. Just the aura that Yun Maxiao was exuding was enough to make Yun Moyan's heart palpitate and his teeth chatter. If he were to fight him head-on, he'd be crippled in no time. But if he were to open his mouth, he'd probably be crippled as well. As a result, Yun Moyuan clenched his teeth tightly once more. Heh. Yun Maxiao sneered, looks like you've already forgotten the taste of my fist. I'll let you savor it a little longer. As soon as Yun Maxiao finished speaking, his fist landed squarely on the bridge of Yun Moyuan's nose. Ah! Yun Moyan felt an indescribable pain rush to his brain, and his brain felt like it was going to explode. Although Yun Maxiao's blows were heavy, he had controlled the strength and position of his blows perfectly. Not only would he feel the pain, but he wouldn't be so badly injured that he'd pass out. As a result, Yun Moyuan felt like he was about to lose consciousness, but he quickly regained consciousness. My nose. Yun Moyan felt a warm liquid dripping down his nose. He wiped it with his hand and it was dark red in the night. Your nose is fine now, but you won't know in a moment. Yun Maxiao's fist came down again. This time his nose would probably be broken and his face would be disfigured. Stop hitting me, I'll talk, Yun Moyan hurriedly said. Yun Maxiao's fist stopped at the tip of his nose. Tell me, why are you spying on my sister? Did Madame An send you? Yun Maxiao shouted. Yun Moyuan glanced at Yun Ruoyan. She was dressed in a light yellow dress, and her face was concealed by a peach blossom veil. Her eyebrows were slightly furrowed and her eyes were bright and sharp. Aunt didn't send me here, Yun Moyuan replied. I came here on my own. You came here on your own? Yun Ruoyan saw that he was staring at her with a burning gaze. She asked coldly, what do you want to do in the middle of the night? Ruoyan, don't be angry, I didn't want to do anything, Yun Moyan explained anxiously. I just wanted to see you. Didn't want to do anything, just wanted to see you. Although this wasn't a big deal, it depended on who said it and under what circumstances. Yun Moyan was a grown man of 16 or 17, peeping outside his sister's courtyard in the middle of the night. When he was caught, he said that he didn't want to do anything, just wanted to see her. Everyone looked at each other, a single word appearing in their minds. Sick. Yun Moyan really was sick and lovesick at that. It turned out that on the day of the Yun matriarch's birthday banquet, Yun Moyan had been unable to forget Yun Ruoyan after seeing her once in her quarters. Yun Moyan had traveled extensively with his father, and he had seen countless beauties. Although he had been stunned by their beauty before, he had never been as captivated by it as he was now. After Yun Ruoyan had been abducted by the spiritual master, he had been extremely worried. When he heard that Yun Ruoyan had returned safely, he had immediately wanted to pay her a visit. But then he remembered how he had pointed at Yun Ruoyan's nose and called her an ugly freak, how no one would have seen him die on the streets, and how he had even beaten her. It had only been a few months since then, and if he were to pay her a visit now, he would likely be misunderstood as having ulterior motives. As a result, he hesitated, wandering around the vicinity of Tinglan Yuan, getting closer and closer to it. After being seen a few times during the day, Yun Moyan decided to loiter around at night. Even if he could only hear Yun Ruoyan's laughter with the servant girl in the courtyard, when he went to bed at night, his mind would be filled with the girl's bell-like laughter, and he would have a good night's sleep. Over the next few days, as if he had become addicted, he would come to spy on her every day, and today he had been caught red-handed. Ruoyan, I really didn't want to hurt you. It's just that. I just couldn't control myself, Yun Moyuan said directly to Yun Ruoyan. Having lived two lives, Yun Ruoyan naturally understood what Yun Moyuan's gaze and tone meant. She immediately felt a chill in her heart, and she turned around to avoid Yun Moyuan's gaze. Although Yun Maxiao had grown up in the army, he had never had a romantic relationship. However, those ruffian soldiers in the army didn't have any control over their mouths. They spouted all sorts of things about love and affection. After a brief moment of surprise, he could tell from Yun Moyun's tone that something was amiss. In an instant, a wave of anger surged from his chest, and without a word he punched Yun Moyun's left eye. Ouch. Brother, don't hit me. Yun Moyun begged. I'm just telling the truth, I really just wanted to take a look. I don't have any ill intentions. It would have been better if Yun Moyun hadn't begged for mercy, but the moment he did, Yun Maxiao became even more enraged. He grabbed Yun Moyun's shirt and lifted him up to his face. You filthy brat, my sister isn't someone you can look at just because you want to. As he spoke, he punched Yun Moyun's right eye again. Was the shadow I saw on the streets a few days ago you? Speak. Seeing that Yun Maxiao's punches were getting harder and harder to control, Peony spoke up to stop him. Young master, you can't hit him anymore. He's still one of us and he's the second master's only son. If you kill him, it'll be hard for us to explain ourselves. Although Peony was angry, she was still rational. That's right, young master, you can't kill him, Xilan added. At most, dig his eyes out. Xilan didn't know much about romantic relationships, so she wasn't as angry as the others. However, peeking in the middle of the night wasn't a good thing, and gouging out his eyes was the best punishment. All right. Yun Maxiao loosened his grip. I'll dig out your eyes and you'll never dare to do such a despicable thing again. As he spoke, he stretched out 2 fingers, intending to poke Yun Moyun's eyes blind. Brother. Yun Ruoyan hurriedly turned around to stop him. No. Although Yun Moyun disgusted her, he was the only son of the Yun family's second branch, Yun Feng. Yun Feng's wife Feng Hua had died young, leaving behind only this child, and Yun Feng doted on him as if he were the apple of his eye. As a result, even though Yun Moyuan's cultivation wasn't high, he still had quite a bit of status in the Yun family. Yun Feng often brought him along to teach him how to manage the family's stores, and in the future he would be in charge of half of the Yun family's businesses. If Yun Maxiao were to dig out his eyes, wouldn't that be the same as digging out Yun Feng's eyeballs? Once a grudge was formed, there would be no way to resolve it. This brat is really too impudent. How dare he have designs on my sister? If I don't dig out his eyes, I won't be able to vent my anger. Even though Yun Maxiao knew the consequences, he couldn't take it lying down. How dare he harbor such depraved thoughts? Once I dig out his eyes, I'll explain everything to second uncle. I don't believe that second uncle will be so shameless as to shield me. Brother, if you really dig out his eyes, things won't be so easy. Yun Ruoyan hurriedly tugged on her brother's arm. Right now they were in the right, but if they went too far and provoked the Yun family's anger, they wouldn't be able to explain themselves. Moreover, Yun Ruoyan didn't want to make a big deal out of this. Her reputation wasn't good to begin with, and the rumors outside had already demonized her. There really wasn't a need to add to her reputation. When Yun Moyun saw that Yun Ruoyan was pleading for him, he misunderstood her, thinking that she couldn't bear to hurt him. Sister Ruoyan, I know I didn't treat you well in the past. Not only did I scold you, I even hit you. At this time, Yun Moyun was still busy expressing his thoughts to Yun Ruoyan. Ever since I saw you at grandmother's, I haven't been able to eat or drink. I just want to see you again. You're still spouting nonsense. Yun Maxiao raised his leg and kicked his brother's thigh. This time, however, Yun Moyun was very strong-willed. He only grunted before continuing, My infatuation with you, Sister Ruoyan, can be witnessed by the heavens. Yun Moyuan's expression was incomparably sincere, and he didn't seem to be faking it. Yun Ruoyan's face darkened. She hadn't expected, in both her past and present life, that she would encounter such a horrendous peach blossom. Chapter 129. Second young master, don't spout nonsense. You'll ruin my mistress' reputation and you'll ruin yourself as well. Peony was both embarrassed and angry when she saw Yun Moyun staring at her mistress. Xilan finally reacted and pulled Ling Lan in front of Yun Ruoyan, blocking Yun Moyuan's line of sight. Yun Maxiao forcibly suppressed his urge to gouge out Yun Moyuan's eyes. His handsome face flushed red with anger. Yun Ruoyan, on the other hand, didn't feel too offended. She simply didn't like Yun Moyun. On the Qinyuan continent, Cousins could marry, but cousins with the same surname couldn't. This was a matter that could be dealt with as a matter of law. What had gotten into Yun Ruoyan's head? Could this really be Madame Anne's doing? Was she trying to ruin Yun Ruoyan's reputation and then get rid of her? Although the practice of marrying someone of the same surname was looked down upon and forbidden, it wasn't rare to find such a practice in history. Among the common folk, there were stories of siblings who were discovered sleeping together and drowned in a pig cage. Another of the biggest scandals of the Li Kingdom was that at the ripe old age of 50, the third emperor of the Li Kingdom had taken a fancy to his brother's youngest daughter and lured her into the palace to have sex with her, only to be discovered by the crown prince. This was the first time that a crown prince of the Li Kingdom had attempted to usurp power, and it was from then on that the punishment for marrying someone of the same surname was written into the law. If this was really Madame Anne's doing, then her intentions were truly vicious. Fortunately, she had discovered Yun Moyuan's intentions in time. Otherwise, if outsiders had discovered Yun Moyuan's intentions, even if it had nothing to do with her, she would have been accused of seducing her cousin. However, when Yun Ruoyan thought about it, it didn't seem likely. Yun Moyan wasn't an idiot and he wouldn't be used by Madame Anne so easily. Moreover, Yun Moyan was the second son of the Yun family, and Madame Anne wouldn't dare do such a thing. Yun Moyuan. Yun Ruoyan called out from between the two maids. We share the same surname, so let me ask you, do you know that marrying someone of the same surname is a serious crime? I do. Seeing that Yun Ruoyan was willing to talk to him, Yun Moyan hurriedly tried to get up, but his right leg wouldn't listen to him and he sat back down. Yun Maxiao had kicked Yun Moyan's right leg with great force, and even if it didn't break his leg, it was still swollen. If you know, then why are you still messing around? Aren't you afraid of being drowned in a pig cage? Don't harm my young mistress, Shilon said angrily. Of course I wouldn't harm Ruoyan. Yun Moyan hurriedly said, if my surname wasn't Yun, wouldn't I have nothing to do with Ruoyan? Naturally we wouldn't have a relationship. What did you say? Yun Maxiao shouted, you dare to say such nonsense. You're really sick. Let me give you 2 more punches to wake you up. Big brother, don't panic. Listen to me, Yun Moyan said anxiously. I'm not spouting nonsense. My father brought me here. Yun Moyuan's words stunned the crowd once more. Pini was born into the family and had grown up with many of the Yun family's juniors. Although she hadn't interacted with Yun Moyuan before, she had known him since she was young. He was the only son of the second branch, so how could he possibly have been adopted? It's true. Seeing that the crowd didn't believe him, Yun Moyan hurriedly continued, I overheard my aunt talking to my cousins. My mother has always been weak and sickly, and I was brought here by my aunt from a distant relative for my parents to raise. Although the crowd found Yun Moyuan's words hard to believe, it wasn't entirely impossible. The second branch's wife had been sickly ever since she married into the Yun family, and she had passed away before Yun Moyan was half a year old. It was likely that Yun Feng had asked Madame Anne to find a child for him in order to comfort his wife. Did you hear this from Madame Anne and her daughters? Yun Maxiao asked. Do you really believe what they say? Normally, I wouldn't believe it, and even if it were true, I wouldn't want to believe it, Yun Moyuan continued. Yun Moyan continued, but those few days I was troubled by my feelings for Sister Ruan. When I heard this news, I was shocked but happy, so I went to ask my father about it, and under my persistent questioning, he admitted to it. He even told me that if I wanted to return to my family, he wouldn't stop me. So Ruoyan were not even related by blood at all. Yun Maxiao's gaze passed through the 2 maids and landed on Yun Ruoyan once more. As long as I'm willing to return to my family, we won't have the same surname anymore. At that time I'll officially take you home and I won't mistreat you. Yun Ruoyan felt a headache coming on. What a rotten peach blossom. Indeed, Madame Anne had played a part in the blossoming of the peach blossoms. You want to marry my sister? You're a toad lusting after swan meat. Yun Maxiao was so angry that he laughed. I'm not a toad, Yun Moyuan argued. Ruoyan, you've indeed become more beautiful, but your reputation isn't good outside. I'm definitely worthy of you. Rather than marrying off to some random person, why not marry me? I can guarantee that I'll treat you well. Yun Ruoyan rubbed her throbbing head and sighed. Sometimes, it wasn't the flower's fault for attracting butterflies and bees. She'd never intended to attract butterflies and bees, and she'd even been careful not to reveal her true beauty. Yet these butterflies and bees were forcing her to use her trump card. Yun Ruoyan motioned for Shilan and Peony to move aside before walking up to Yun Moyuan's side and squatting down. Ruoyan. Yun Ma Xiao called out, his face filled with surprise. Have you changed your mind? I'll really treat you well. Yun Moyun. Yun Ruoyan finally spoke up. You said that you liked me because of my beautiful face, not because I'm a person, right? Everyone loves beauty, and a fair and graceful lady is a man's dream, Yun Moyuan admitted confidently. I like your face, and if I don't see you for a day I won't be able to eat or drink. That's no different from liking you. Sure. Yun Ruoyan smiled at his words. Her eyebrows were elegant, her eyes like stars, and her lips were crimson. Her skin was as translucent as jade, and when she smiled her pearl-white teeth were faintly discernible. The peach blossoms on her cheeks complemented each other. Yun Ma Xiao felt his eyes light up and his heart nearly stopped. Yun Ruoyan waved her hand in front of Yun Moyuan's dazed eyes, then sneered, "Since you like this face so much, I'll let you have a good look." Then she took off the peach blossom veil on the right side of her face, revealing the birthmark on her face. The birthmark resembled a red centipede, stretching from the corner of her right eye to her chin. It was as if someone had suddenly added a stroke to a beautiful painting. All that was left was eerie and tragic. Yun Moyuan's heart skipped a beat and cold sweat beaded on his forehead. In the past, Yun Ruoyan didn't wear a veil. She would hide her face with her head lowered, and her figure would wither like a withered dog's tail. That kind of person paired with that kind of face was loathsome and disgusting but not frightening. Now, however, she was like a phoenix flower facing the wind, and one couldn't help but admire her beauty. When she slowly approached and then suddenly revealed such a face, those with poor mental fortitude would be scared to death. How is it, cousin? Yun Ruoyan smiled, very satisfied with the effect. Do you think that such a face will make you unable to eat even if you don't see it for a day? Perhaps it would only be if he saw it every day that he wouldn't be able to eat. Yun Moyuan's reaction was much better than Li Qianxiao's. At the very least he didn't piss his pants. He swallowed his saliva and said, "Ruoyan, I know you're very concerned about this birthmark on your face, but I'm not in a hurry. I'll accompany you as it slowly heals and disappears. Even if it doesn't completely disappear, I won't mind." Yun Ruoyan frowned. "Who told you that my birthmark would heal?" "I heard it from His Highness and the second prince." Yun Moyuan didn't try to hide the truth. "That day outside Xianglan's cottage, I inadvertently overheard the two of them talking. The crown prince told the second prince that your birthmark was much better than before. He also said that you took Elder Lin's elixir and that the birthmark on your face is slowly recovering. He regretted being scared away by you that day and neglecting you. He is thinking of a way to get your forgiveness and marry you." Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. It seemed like this wasn't the only rotten peach. "Ruoyan, I know you don't want to share a husband with Qianying," Yun Moyuan continued. "I'm willing to give up my status as the second young master of the Yun family to marry you. I'll tell father about this tomorrow at dawn." "What if I say that I'm not willing?" "You'll be willing," Yun Moyuan replied. "I have plenty of time to make you willing." Yun Moyuan was a spoiled young master, and there were very few things that he couldn't get his hands on. The way he looked at Yun Ruoyan now was as if he were determined to have her. Yun Ruoyan was quite annoyed by Yun Moyuan's determined attitude. She slowly stood up, sighed deeply and turned to her brother. "Brother, this matter can't be settled privately. It looks like we'll have to settle it publicly." Within Madame Anne's cottage, Yun Ruoyao still hadn't returned to her own. Madame Anne hadn't been feeling well these past few days, but Yun Ruoyao, as a filial daughter, had been taking care of her all day. Madame Anne looked at Yun Ruoyao's somewhat gaunt face and sighed inwardly. After all, this girl had crawled out of her womb. Yi Qianying and Yun Ruoyu hadn't come to pay their respects in days. Did they really think that she was useless? "How's Moyuan doing?" Madame Anne asked as she swallowed the medicine Yun Ruoyao had fed her. "According to one of his servants, he goes out every night and only returns late at night," Yun Ruoyao replied. "He's headed in the direction of Yun Ruoyao's cottages." Madame Anne chuckled as she swallowed another mouthful of medicine. "I really didn't expect him to be so infatuated with that girl." "That's right, I didn't expect it either," Yun Ruoyao replied. That day at Yun Ruoyan's cottages, When I saw the way Cousin Muyan looked at Yun Ruoyan, I immediately felt that something was off. It was only after Mother reminded me that I realized. It turned out that Madame N had already noticed that Yun Moyuan's gaze toward Yun Ruoyan wasn't pure and innocent. At the time, Madame N had thought that Yun Ruoyan would surely be accepted by the Buddhists, so she hadn't paid too much attention to it. Later, not only had Yun Ruoyan not been defeated by the Buddhists, but she had even returned to Madame Anne's cottage. Yun Lan had ordered her not to provoke Yun Ruoyan, so she had focused all her attention on this matter. 16 or 17 years old are the hardest to control their emotions, Madame Anne replied. But he still knows some manners and he doesn't dare to do anything immoral. Now that I've exposed his parentage, I've helped him. Mother. Yun Ruoyao placed the empty bowl on the table by the bedside. Will father betroth Ruoyan to cousin Muyuan? Chapter 130. Madame Anne pondered Yun Ruoyao's question for a moment, but she didn't respond. She had never been able to see through Yun Lan, nor could she fathom what he was thinking. Back when she and Lin Yueme had married Yun Lan, she had witnessed with her own eyes how much he doted on Lin Yueme. It was as if he held her in his hands, afraid that she would drop, afraid that she would melt. As for his and Lin Yueme's first child Yun Moxiao, he had spent a great deal of time and effort grooming him. Yun Moxiao himself didn't know, but Madame Anne did. Every year Yun Lan would send large amounts of resources to the army that Yun Moxiao served in. General Huang had always been fond of Yun Moxiao, and with the Yun family's support he was even more devoted to his disciple. Coupled with Yun Moxiao's own hard work, he was able to become an 8th-rank Blade Master and 5th-rank Beast Master at such a young age. He had even become the youngest general in the Li Kingdom after Liemo. However, Yun Lan's attitude toward Yun Ruoyan was markedly different. According to Madame Anne, even if Yun Ruoyan had become ugly and lost her talent for cultivation, she was still the child of Yun Lan and the woman he loved the most, and he couldn't possibly ignore her. As a result, Madame Anne didn't dare to harm Yun Ruoyan openly, only giving her a light punishment. However, she found that Yun Lan didn't seem to care about her at all. As a result, she increased her punishment time and time again, from a scolding to a forced kneeling in the ancestral hall without food. Madame Anne's original goal wasn't to take Yun Ruoyan's life, but to think of her mother whenever she saw Yun Ruoyan. How annoying. If she didn't see Yun Ruoyan, she would be annoyed to think of the mother and daughter. Lin Yueme was already dead, but Yun Ruoyan had to be left behind to annoy her. How could she not be annoyed? No, she didn't. Yun Ruoyan had slowly turned from an ugly duckling into a beautiful woman, and her cultivation base was improving at a godly pace. However, Madame Anne discovered that Yun Lan's attitude toward Yun Ruoyan hadn't changed much. Although Madame Anne was puzzled, she was certain that Yun Lan still didn't like his daughter. Especially after Yun Ruoyan had settled old scores with him in front of Yun Moxiao, Yun Lan would frown whenever Yun Ruoyan was mentioned. Would he marry Yun Ruoyan off to someone else as soon as possible? Regardless of whether your father betroths that girl to someone else or not, there's going to be a good show to watch, Madame Anne said with a smile. Mother and daughter were talking when the curtain was suddenly lifted. Hong Yu stuck her head in and said, Madam, Master has sent someone to summon you to the main hall to discuss official business. Did you say what it was? Yun Ruoyao asked. Hong Yu shook her head. He didn't say, but it looks urgent. All right, just tell him that I'll pack up and go right away. Madame Anne waved her hand. Mother, it's almost midnight. What could have happened? Yun Ruoyao helped Madame Anne up. We're going to the hall to discuss official business, so it's not a private matter. Madame Anne allowed Yun Ruoyao to help her put on the white robe as she commented, It seems that we'll have to settle this matter. Yun Ruoyao's hands paused as she asked, Could it be that cousin Moin was discovered spying on Ruoyan? That's good, Madame Anne said with a smile. She couldn't just embarrass herself in front of everyone. As the matriarch of the household, she had been punished to kneel in the ancestral hall, hand-copied scriptures, and even scolded by Yun Lan in front of all the servants in the main hall. Not a single person had come to visit her when she had fallen ill. The 4th branch was working as an official in another part of the household and had already returned home. But not a single person from the 2nd and 3rd branches who were temporarily staying in the manor had come to visit her. They really didn't care about her at all. I'd like to see who the master will side with, the ugly daughter of that woman and the precious daughter of the second branch. Mother, I'll go too. Yun Ruiyao wanted to join in on the fun. Madame An nodded in agreement. As she walked out the door, she reminded her, we're only going to watch the show, so don't say anything. I understand, Yun Ruiyao replied. Yun Ruoyan and Yun Moxiao stood in the middle of the hall, and one of them was kneeling on the floor. Madame An could tell from his back that it was Yun Mun. Yun Lan was already seated at the head of the table. Madame An didn't see the Yun matriarch and she assumed that she had fallen asleep. Madame An nodded at Yun Lan and greeted him. Yun Lan's face was cold, but he gestured at the head of the table beside him, motioning for her to sit. Madame An hesitated for a moment before taking the seat next to Yun Lan. Yun Ruiyao helped Madame An to stand by her side. If the Yun matriarch were present, Madame An wouldn't have been able to take this seat. Her usual seat was the wooden chair beside Yun Lan. Although the Yun matriarch had long since retired from the household, whenever the Yun matriarch had to discuss important matters, she would always be placed in the seat of honor. Even though she rarely participated in the discussions, she was still treated like a deity. The reason why the Yun matriarch was so respected was not only because she was the most senior member of the Yun family, but also because of her high cultivation. As a peak 8th rank blade master, she was superior to many men. On the Qinyuan continent, as long as her cultivation was high enough, a woman could stand on equal footing with a man or even surpass him. However, if her cultivation wasn't high enough, then it was a different story. Madame An, for example, was only a 4th rank blade master, and that was only because she had been nurtured by her mother's family. In terms of combat ability, Madame An wasn't even a 4th rank blade master. As a result, although she was the matriarch of the Yun family in name and managed the affairs of the household, because of her low cultivation, the family didn't respect her very much. At this moment, Madame An was able to sit at the head of the table with Yun Lan. She raised her head and puffed out her chest as she looked down at the crowd. Standing by Madame An's side, Yun Ruiyao felt quite pleased as well. After all, the seat next to the head of the table was reserved for the legitimate sons and daughters of the first wife. She couldn't help but raise her chin and puff out her chest. Old Wu, why aren't the second and third masters here yet? Yun Lan asked impatiently. Master, they've already been invited and they'll be here soon, Old Wu replied. Brother, what's going on in the middle of the night? At this moment, a loud male voice came from outside. Following the voice, a burly man in his 30s walked in. This was the third son of the Yun family, Yun Senator. He was a forge master and was in charge of the Yun family's 2 forgery halls. Moin, why are you sitting on the floor? Yun Sin asked curiously when he saw Yun Moin kneeling on the floor. Yun Moyun lowered his head and didn't speak. Third uncle, this brat was too brazen. I injured one of his legs and he can't stand up now, Yun Moxiao explained. Yun Sin wanted to ask more but Yun Lan interrupted him. Third brother, please wait for a moment. We'll talk about this matter in detail when second brother arrives. Not long after, Yun Feng also arrived. He had seen Yun Moyuan's figure from afar, and he hurriedly walked into the hall. Instead of asking about Yun Moyuan right away, he first apologized to Yun Lan. As it turned out, a shop in another city had run into some problems that needed to be dealt with urgently. Yun Feng had finished writing the necessary documents and had them sent away in time before rushing over. Brother, did you summon us here because of Mun? Yun Feng asked. Everyone's gazes landed on Yun Lan, waiting for him to speak. Yun Ruoyan was a little regretful. Regarding this matter, Yun Moxiao's opinion was to give Yun Moyuan a good beating. Beat him until he couldn't get out of bed for an entire year, and even better until all his teeth were knocked out so that he couldn't open his mouth or speak. By the time he could get out of bed, Yun Ruoyan would have long since gone to Kongming Academy, and he would have nothing to do with her. However, Yun Ruoyan was afraid of causing trouble for Yun Moxiao. Yun Moxiao was going to inherit Yun Lan's position as head of the Yun family in the future, and it would be detrimental to his ability to govern the family in the future. As a result, Yun Ruoyan decided to make a fair decision. She had originally intended to find the Yun matriarch and have her use her authority as an elder to put an end to Yun Moyuan's plans. Just as they were escorting Yun Moyuan to Yun Ruoyan's quarters, They happened to run into Yun Lan coming out of his quarters, resulting in the current situation. At this point Yun Ruoyan couldn't understand why Yun Lan had summoned everyone here. This wasn't something to be proud of. Although everyone present was part of the Yun family, there was still a need for respect between family members. Wouldn't this be akin to slapping Yun Feng's face in front of everyone? Moreover, Yun Feng had always been respectful to Yun Lan, and Yun Lan wouldn't disrespect him. Second brother, this matter does indeed have something to do with Mo Yuan, Yun Lan replied. Mo Yuan has been spoiled by me since he was young and he doesn't know how to behave. I don't know what he's done to anger young Master Yun. Yun Feng was an extremely intelligent person, and with a single glance he could tell that Yun Mo Yuan's injuries were caused by Yun Mo Xiao. Although he was protective of Yun Mo Xiao, he also knew that Yun Mo Xiao wasn't someone who would beat someone up for no reason. The root of the problem was likely Yun Mo Yuan's own fault, and the only reason Yun Mo Xiao would be so angry was because of Yun Ruoyan. 4 years ago Yun Mo Xiao had beaten up Yun Mo Xiao because of Yun Ruoyan, and this time it must be because of her as well. Yun Feng's gaze couldn't help but land on Yun Ruoyan. In just half a year Yun Ruoyan had grown so much that Yun Feng couldn't even recognize her. That day at the Yun matriarch's birthday banquet, Yun Feng had almost failed to recognize Yun Ruoyan. At this moment Yun Ruoyan was standing there quietly, not saying a word. Her calm demeanor reminded Yun Feng of his sister-in-law Yun Ruoyan's mother Lin Yueme. I caught Yun Mo Yuan sneaking around my sister's quarters in the middle of the night, Yun Mo Xiao replied. If there's anything else I'll leave it to him. Yun Feng glanced at Yun Mo Yuan, and the scene of Yun Mo Yuan asking him about his parentage flashed through his mind. Originally he had intended to tell Yun Mo Yuan about this matter when he turned 18, but he hadn't expected Yun Mo Yuan to discover it himself, so he didn't hide it from him. Yun Feng had thought that Yun Mo Yuan would be sad when he learned of this matter, but he found that not only was Yun Mo Yuan not sad, he even seemed very happy. Now that he saw the scene in front of him, as the saying goes, no one knows his son better than his father. Yun Feng instantly guessed what had happened. Father. Yun Mo Yuan suddenly raised his head and stared at Yun Feng with swollen eyes. You promised to let me acknowledge you as my master, right? I don't want to be a descendant of the Yun family. I want to be your son-in-law. Chapter 131. Everyone was taken aback by Yun Mo Yuan's words. Yunsen looked at Yun Mo Yuan. What nonsense are you spouting? Second uncle, I'm not spouting nonsense, Yun Mo Yuan replied. I'm not the biological child of my parents. They adopted me. How is that not nonsense? Yunsen raised his voice. Where did you hear that from? Yun Mo Yuan glanced at Madame An. I heard it from eldest aunt. Everyone turned to look at Madame An. She hadn't expected Yun Mo Yuan to push her out of the limelight. When did I ever say something like that to you? She asked hurriedly. That day when I went to visit you in the rippling courtyard, I happened to overhear your conversation with a few of my cousins, Yun Mo Yuan replied. Ah. Madame An pretended to be surprised. How could you eavesdrop on others? Madame An looked at Yun Lan and saw that he was sitting expressionlessly on his seat, unable to tell whether he was happy or angry. She then turned to Yun Feng and said, Isn't it because the anniversary of Aju's death is approaching? Sister-in-law was talking about Aju that day and accidentally let it slip. I didn't expect that child Mo Yuan to be eavesdropping outside. Aju was Yun Feng's wife, who had passed away at an early age. Madame Anne's words didn't shirk her responsibility, but at the same time minimized her own. Even if Yun Feng blamed her, he couldn't show it on his face. Yun Feng sighed. There's no need to blame yourself. I didn't want to keep this a secret from Mo Yuan forever. You were the one who gave the baby to us to raise. Now that he's grown up, you're the most suitable person to tell him. So this is true, Yunsen said in surprise when he heard what the two of them said. Only Madame and Yun Lan, Yun Feng and a few others knew that Yun Mo Yuan had been adopted. Naturally Yunsen didn't. Yes, it's true, Yun Feng said. I've also promised Mo Yuan that as long as he's willing, he can return to the family at any time. Brother, how can that be? Yunsen stood up from his seat. No matter what, Mo Yuan was raised by our Yun family. How can he just leave like that? When our Yun family raised you, are you going to be so ungrateful? Yunsen glared at Yun Mo Yuan. Third uncle Yun Mo Yuan didn't know how to respond. Although he was already a 17-year-old adult, He had been spoiled since he was a child. He had always considered problems from his own feelings and rarely cared about others, not to mention the great principle of being ungrateful. When Yun Muyuan heard Yunfeng's words, he realized that his actions seemed to have betrayed the Yun family and his father. But when Yun Muyuan turned to look at Yun Ruoyan's silhouette, he felt that there was nothing more important than this girl. If he couldn't be with the person he loved, then he would never be happy in this lifetime. If he wasn't happy, then there was no point in doing anything. Besides, even if he didn't become a descendant of the Yun family, wouldn't he still be a member of the Yun family if he became a son-in-law? It would just be a change of address. Third uncle, even if I return to the Yun family, I won't leave the Yun family, Yun Muyuan said. After I marry Ruoyan, I'll still be a member of the Yun family. What? Yunsen raised his voice. You want to marry your sister? Yes, Yun Muyuan replied seriously. Yun Muyuan's expression was serious. It's precisely for the sake of marrying Sister Ruoyan that I chose to return to my clan. Yun Muyuan, don't spout nonsense. Don't think that I won't dare hit you just because you're here. Yun Muyuan puffed out his chest and said fearlessly, even if you beat me to death, I'll still say it. I like Ruoyan and I must marry her. Alright, I'll beat you to death. Yun Maxiao was about to explode, but Yunsen grabbed him by the waist. Maxiao, we're brothers. Don't be rash. Who's brothers with him? Yun Maxiao roared. If he dares say something like that again, I'll beat him up every time I see him. Brother. Yun Muyuan looked at Yun Maxiao. You've never liked anyone before, so you don't know this feeling. I like Ruoyan, and no matter what price I have to pay, I'll marry her. Although Yun Ruoyao, who was standing by Madame Anne's side, hadn't said a word, she was silently cursing Yun Ruoyan. Just what was so good about this Yun Ruoyan that her arrogant cousin would go so crazy? Yun Ruoyao looked at Yun Ruoyan, only to see that she was standing there quietly, her head slightly lowered. She seemed to be thinking about something. In short, it was as if this matter had nothing to do with her. Even if Yun Ruoyan hadn't been possessed by a fox demon, she definitely knew how to seduce men. Otherwise, how could she have made them go crazy over her? Pei Xiao, Li Qianxiao, and even the slaughtering king Li Mo treated Yun Ruoyan differently. This time, even her own brothers were infatuated with her. She was truly a terrifying person. Muyuan. At this time, Yunsen finally looked at his son and said solemnly, although you are not my biological son, you have been siblings with Ruoyao and Ruoyan for so many years. How can you have such thoughts? Father. Yun Muyuan propped his hands on the ground and raised his head. If I were your biological son and the blood of the Yun family flowed through my veins, I wouldn't dare express such thoughts. But I'm not your biological son, so why can't I express my feelings? You've often told me about your relationship with Mother. For her sake, you were willing to spend the rest of your life alone. Even if you didn't have any children, you were still willing to do so, Yun Muyuan said. I want to be like you, to find such a relationship. Yun Muyuan's words were full of sincerity, and apart from Yun Ruoyan, almost everyone present was moved by his words. Having lived 2 lifetimes, Yun Ruoyan absolutely didn't believe that Yun Muyuan's so-called feelings for her were real. They'd never gone through trials and tribulations together, and yet he couldn't forget her just because of her beauty, and that was what he called feelings for her. For that, he was even willing to give up his status as a scion of the Yun family. Mun, are you sure you really like Ruoyan? Yun Feng asked. Yes, father, I do, Yun Muyuan replied. Yun Muyuan replied, then turned to the silent Yun Lan. Eldest uncle, I know that you must be furious just like brother Mo Xiao, but I promise you that as long as you betroth Ruoyan to me, I'll treat her well. Yun Lan finally turned his gaze to Yun Muyuan's sincere face. Yun Lan had watched Yun Muyuan grow up, and he knew that his brother was domineering, selfish, and only average in talent. In reality, he was a man who was easy to manipulate. But there was something about him that Yun Lan rather admired. Once he truly wanted something, he would overcome all obstacles, be willing to give up, and be willing to go all out. In this aspect, Yun Maxiao was very similar to him. Yun Lan couldn't help but think back to when Yun Maxiao was wooing Lin Yueme, as if even the heavens couldn't stop him. And in the end he would win her heart. Yun Lan turned to Yun Ruoyan. She seemed to have been standing there silently ever since she'd entered the room. Her expressionless face made it seem as if what they were discussing had nothing to do with her. What was she thinking? This question suddenly popped up in Yunlan's mind, and his heart skipped a beat. For a long time Yunlan had been used to controlling everything. Even when he was with the current emperor he could clearly guess what the emperor was thinking and would never guess what he was thinking. Yunlan didn't need to expend much effort to figure out the emperor's thoughts, but now he couldn't help but wonder what Yun Ruoyan was thinking. What frustrated Yunlan even more was that he couldn't figure out what Yun Ruoyan was thinking at all. He didn't know when it had started, but Yun Ruoyan had completely broken free from his control. In the past, Yunlan had hoped that Yun Ruoyan would contribute to the Yun family's interests, and that he would be able to use her to improve his relationship with the crown prince and the slaughtering king. But the premise of that hope was that Yun Ruoyan would remain within his control. Now, however, Yun Ruoyan was slipping further and further away from his control, or rather she had never been in his control. Furthermore, Yun Ruoyan was about to enter Kongming Academy. At that time Yun Ruoyan would become even more of an unknown factor, and this made Yunlan uneasy. Thinking of this, Yunlan's dark eyes suddenly flashed and an idea appeared in his mind. He looked at Yunmoyin and suddenly revealed a benevolent smile. "You're very good." Yunmoyuan's face lit up with delight when he heard Yunlan's words. "Uncle, what do you mean?" "I mean that you're very good." Yunlan's gaze landed on Yun Ruoyan. "I'll be at ease if I betroth Ruoyan to you." "Father." Yun Maxiao was the first to cry out. "Well, why not?" Yunlan looked at his father. "Ruoyan's about to enter Kongming Academy. How can you betroth her now? Besides, with Muyuan's cultivation he's not a good match for her." "All right." Yunlan waved his hand, interrupting Yun Maxiao. "I've made up my mind on this matter." "Father." Yun Maxiao wanted to continue but Yun Ruoyan held him back. Yun Maxiao turned to look at Yun Ruoyan. Her expression was calm, and her lips were curled up in a mysterious smile. "Father, you can't betroth Ruoyan to just anyone because she's already engaged." Yun Maxiao was the first to be stunned by Yun Ruoyan's words. Before Yun Maxiao could react, Yun Ruoyan continued calmly, "Father, don't you know that the emperor has already betrothed me to the slaughtering king during the flower viewing party?" Chapter 132. Of course Yunlan knew about this matter. Some time ago this matter was often discussed among the large clans in the imperial city. But even after such a long time, Li Mo hadn't made any further comments, and the emperor hadn't brought up the matter again. As a result, everyone took it as a harmless joke. From the very start, Yunlan hadn't believed that Li Mo would be interested in Yun Ruoyan, so he hadn't taken the matter seriously. However, on the day of the Yun matriarch's birthday banquet, Yun Ruoyan had been kidnapped by the Daoists, and the slaughtering king had suddenly appeared to save her. Only then did Yunlan realize that Li Mo treated Yun Ruoyan differently. Not long after Li Mo left, his guards arrived. Only then did Yunlan realize that Li Mo had rushed over. How many people in the entire Li kingdom could make the slaughtering king rush over to save them? Based on his years of experience in the bureaucracy, Yunlan was even more certain that Li Mo's treatment of Yun Ruoyan was extraordinary. However, Yunlan couldn't understand why the slaughtering king would be interested in a little girl like Yun Ruoyan, who was so far from his own. After all, Li Mo was famous for not being interested in women. Even though Yun Ruoyan's birthmark bore some resemblance to Lin Yueme's, it still wasn't enough to attract Li Mo. In that case, what was it about Yun Ruoyan that had attracted Li Mo? This question would appear in Yunlan's mind from time to time, and he could not find an answer no matter how hard he thought about it. As a result, Yunlan wanted to betroth Yun Ruoyan to Yun Moyun. If Li Mo was truly interested in Yun Ruoyan, he would definitely interfere with the marriage. At that time he would be able to use this opportunity to get closer to the slaughtering king. If Li Mo didn't appear, he would marry his daughter Yun Ruoyan to Yun Moyun, a man he could definitely control. Then he would slowly regain control of Yun Ruoyan. What a good plan. "Father, Ruoyan is already engaged to the slaughtering king. If you betroth me to someone else, won't it be hard to explain to the slaughtering king?" A faint smile hung on Yun Ruoyan's lips. She looked at Yunlan with a clear gaze as if she had already seen through his schemes. Yunlan could not help but frown. "When did you get engaged to the slaughtering king?" Yun Maxiao and Yun Moyun asked at the same time. Neither of them was in the imperial city during the flower admiring banquet. By the time they returned, the event had already passed, so this was the first time they had heard of it. Sister. Yun Ruoyao suddenly spoke up. If I remember correctly, during the flower viewing party, you rejected the emperor's betrothal in front of everyone. From the looks of it, the slaughtering king didn't seem to care much about his sister either. I'm afraid it's too late for you to regret it now. Ruoyan. Yun Moyuan had already stood up with Yun Feng's help. He looked at Yun Ruoyan. What kind of person is the slaughtering king? Why would he take a liking to you? Don't deceive yourself. Yun Maxiao turned around and glared at Yun Moyun. What's wrong with my sister? How can you look down on her? In the end, Yun Moyun was still a little afraid of him, and he shut his mouth and didn't say another word. Ruoyan, don't worry, I won't let father marry you off so easily. Yun Maxiao turned back to Yun Ruoyan. So, there's no need for us to get involved with the slaughtering king. Although Yun Maxiao had never seen Li Mo in person, there were many legends about the slaughtering king in the army, including the massacre that had shaken the entire Qinyuan continent. Li Mo's fearsomeness was evident. How could such a powerful figure be related to his little sister? Yun Maxiao couldn't believe it from the bottom of his heart. Yun Ruoyan didn't respond to the crowd's suspicions, but she kept a faint smile on her face. In fact, Yun Ruoyan didn't believe that she and Li Mo would develop any sort of romantic relationship. She had only mentioned Li Mo as a temporary measure. She had always thought that Li Mo's actions toward her were nothing more than a form of teasing, like a bored tiger toying with a kitten. If the kitten was obedient, the tiger would be gentle, but if the kitten offended the tiger would immediately bare its sharp teeth. Yun Ruoyan could still vividly remember how Li Mo had slowly tightened his grip around her neck that night. Yun Lan had been watching Yun Ruoyan the entire time. Faced with the crowd's questions, she didn't refute them or explain herself. Yun Lan couldn't see through her at all, and he wanted to test her further. Ruoyan, the betrothal at the flower viewing party was just a joke. Yun Lan slowly stood up from his chair. I know a little about the slaughtering king's character. If he were serious, he wouldn't have stayed silent for so long. Maybe it was what he said that day and he forgot about it after he woke up. Don't take it to heart and just marry Moyun. Father. Yun Ruoyan looked up at her father. Li Mo didn't say anything because I didn't think I was an adult yet, so I didn't want him to. If you don't believe me, I'll go to the slaughtering king's manor tomorrow and have Li Mo speak to you personally. Yun Ruoyan had called the slaughtering king Li Mo. Yun Ruoyan had actually called the slaughtering king by his name in front of everyone. On the Qinyuan continent, strength and status were highly valued. Powerful cultivators and those with the royal bloodline couldn't be casually called by their names. But not only had Yun Ruoyan called him by his name, she had done it so naturally and smoothly. And from Yun Ruoyan's tone, it seemed that she was quite familiar with the slaughtering king. After a moment of shock, the crowd began to believe Yun Ruoyan's words. Could it be that Yun Ruoyan had been in contact with the slaughtering king in private? Right after Yun Ruoyan had been kidnapped, she had disappeared for nearly 2 days and 2 nights. Hadn't she been with the slaughtering king the entire time? That's good. Yun Lan finally smiled. Uncle Yun Moyun panicked when he saw that his father had changed his mind. Moyun. Yun Lan clasped his hands behind his back, his expression serious. Although I'd like to marry Ruoyan to you, if she really is engaged to the slaughtering king, there's nothing I can do. Yun Moyun's legs gave way as he heard his father's words and he lost all his strength. Yun Feng had to use both hands to help him up. Sister Ruoyan, no one in this world will treat you better than me. Yun Moyun looked at Yun Ruoyan. I must witness your engagement with the slaughtering king with my own eyes, or I won't give up. Cousin. Yun Ruoyan finally turned around and looked at Yun Moyun. I advise you to give up on me as soon as possible. Whether you're a member of the Yun family or not, I don't care. I've never had anything to do with you, and I'll never have anything to do with you. Sister Ruoyan. Yun Moyun wanted to continue. Yun Feng interrupted him. You can pursue what you love, but you can't force it. Ever since Yun Feng had entered the hall, Yun Ruoyan hadn't even glanced at Yun Moyun. Yun Feng could tell that Yun Ruoyan didn't like Yun Moyun. Yun Feng loved his son dearly, and he couldn't bear to see Yun Moyun detest him. Even if he were to marry Yun Ruoyan, it would only bring him pain. Father's going to the Qin kingdom tomorrow and you're coming with me. Yun Feng rarely used such a forceful tone with Yun Moyun. Father. Yun Moyun immediately wanted to retort. However, Yun Feng turned to Yun Lan. Brother, there's a problem with the shops in the Qin Kingdom. I'll be heading there tomorrow morning, so I won't be able to bid you farewell. Yun Lan nodded in agreement, and Yun Feng dragged Yun Moyun away. Father, I'm not leaving. Yun Moyun shouted as he was dragged away by Yun Feng. I won't give up, Sister Ruoyan, unless you marry the slaughtering king. Otherwise, I won't give up. Ruoyan, Yun Lan said as he walked up to Yun Ruoyan. I'll definitely arrange a marriage for you before you turn 15. If it's not Muyuan or the slaughtering king, it can be someone else. Yun Ruoyan knew that Yun Lan was threatening her. Yes, father, she replied respectfully. I'll be waiting for the slaughtering king's arrival at home tomorrow. Yun Lan walked out of the hall. Alright, it's getting late. Go back and rest. Only when Yun Lan's silhouette completely disappeared from the hall did Yun Ruoyan and Yun Ruoxiao step out. Mother, is the slaughtering king really serious with Ruoyan? Yun Ruoyao asked as she watched the two of them leave. If it's just a game, how could it be serious? Madam An replied. It's just a matter of how big the slaughtering king wants to go. It was already late at night, and a gust of cold wind caused Yun Ruoyan to hug herself tightly. Yun Ma Xiao took off his outer robe and draped it over Yun Ruoyan. Are you and the slaughtering king really? No. Yun Ruoyan tightened the robe around her. Then what about tomorrow? Yun Ma Xiao was a little anxious. But he'll help me out, Yun Ruoyan replied. After all, she had saved his life quite a few times, and Li Moyin should be willing to help her out. It should be possible, right? Yun Ruoyan wasn't sure. After all, Li Mo had also helped her save his life, and the two of them were even. Li Mo was a giant mystery to Yun Ruoyan, and she wasn't even sure whether he was human or not. Moreover, Li Mo's inexplicable behavior was completely out of her league. Yun Ruoyan thought that he was crazy. Would such a mysterious crazy fellow really help her? Achoo! In the slaughtering king's manor, Li Mo, who was drinking with Li Qianhan, suddenly sneezed. Uncle, what's wrong? Li Qianhan was quite surprised. This was the first time he had seen Li Mo sneeze. Li Mo frowned as he looked at his right hand, deep in thought. After dripping a drop of blood from his finger onto the qilin beads, he could sense some of the feelings of the wearer. Li Mo had suddenly felt a gust of cold wind enter his nose, causing him to sneeze involuntarily. Rubbing his nose, he murmured to himself, "Why isn't that lass sleeping in the middle of the night? Why is she out in the cold wind?" The next day, as usual, Yun Ruoyan woke up early in the morning to cultivate and disguise herself. After washing up and eating breakfast, she left the manor. A carriage was already waiting for her at the gates. Yun Ruoyan boarded the carriage without a word, and the coachman whipped the horse around and headed toward the slaughtering king's manor. Chapter 133. After the carriage left, Steward Wu hurried to Yun Lan's quarters to report to him. Yun Lan was meditating on a boulder in his courtyard. He had taken the day off to await the slaughtering king's arrival. The slaughtering king's manor was in the northwest of the capital, in the opposite direction from the Yun manor. It would take at least 4 hours to travel across the entire capital. Yun Ma Xiao had offered to accompany Yun Ruoyan to the slaughtering king's manor last night, but Yun Ruoyan had refused. Yun Ruoyan didn't think Li Mo was a hospitable person. With nothing else to do, Yun Ma Xiao wandered the streets early in the morning. Just then Yun Ruoyan's carriage passed by him and he recognized it immediately. He couldn't help but walk in the direction the carriage was heading in. "Mistress, mistress." Inside the carriage, Yun Ruoyan was resting with her eyes closed when Qiu called out to her. "What's the matter, Qiu?" Yun Ruoyan replied. "You can use this opportunity to get the slaughtering king to take you to buy the ingredients for your poison. I'm sure he knows where to buy them." "That's right, why didn't I think of that?" Yun Ruoyan opened her eyes. "If Li Mo won't take me, I'll go look for Li Qianhan." How could she have forgotten about those two? The carriage sped along, arriving at the gates of the slaughtering king's manor in less than 2 hours. Yun Ruoyan dismounted and walked toward the gates, but the guards at the gates immediately drew their swords to block her path. Yun Ruoyan frowned. That day when Li Qianhan had brought her out, She remembered that there had been black-robed guards by the gates. Why were there armored guards now? I'd like to see the slaughtering king, Yun Ruoyan said to the guards. Please inform him of my arrival. The two armored guards looked at each other. The slightly plump one said, You came too early. His Highness drank with the third prince last night and drank too much. He hasn't woken up yet. You should come back later. So Li Qianhan was here as well, then she wouldn't have to bother looking for him. When will your Highness sober up? Yun Ruoyan asked. I don't know, but it depends. Sometimes he'll be drunk for a day or two, the thinner guard replied. Sometimes he wakes up very quickly. Speechless, Yun Ruoyan retreated to a tree by the door, leaned against it and waited. Not long after, a green-robed woman walked out of the house. Yun Ruoyan recognized her at a glance and hurried over to greet her. Sister Li Luo, Yun Ruoyan called out. Li Luo turned around to see Yun Ruoyan in a pink dress. She wore a veil embroidered with phoenix petals, and her hair was simply tied up at the back of her head, revealing her smooth forehead. Her lips were red, her teeth pearly, and her smile was radiant. Compared to the day Li Mo had carried her back to the slaughtering king's manor, her face was swollen and haggard. Miss Yun. Li Luo paused for a moment before recognizing Yun Ruoyan. Are you here to see His Highness? Li Luo asked before Yun Ruoyan could respond. Yes. Yun Ruoyan smiled. Follow me. Li Luo led Yun Ruoyan into the slaughtering king's manor. Yun Ruoyan had been in a hurry that day, and she hadn't taken a good look at the manor. As she walked, she couldn't help but look around. The slaughtering king's manor wasn't much different from any other manor, having been bestowed to him by the imperial family. The only difference was that it was so quiet. The Yun manor was large and there were many servants. Unless they were in a particularly secluded area, they would always be able to hear the sounds of people talking. However, as they walked along the corridors, all they could hear was the chirping of birds. Your manor is so quiet, Yun Ruoyan remarked casually. His Highness prefers peace and quiet. There are only about 10 servants in the manor, and they're all scattered around the manor, Li Luo replied. The 4 branches of the Yun family didn't live together, and Yun Lan's 2 concubines lived outside. Although there weren't many Yun family members in the manor, there were at least 100 servants. In comparison, Li Mo was quite a simple man. Li Luo brought Yun Ruoyan into a small sitting room and had her wait for a moment while she went to invite Li Mo. After Li Luo left, Yun Ruoyan was bored sitting in the sitting room, so she walked out to the corridor to admire the scenery. Outside the corridor was a pond of water with lotus flowers growing in it. Now that summer was coming to an end, the lotus flowers had already withered, leaving behind bowl-sized lotus pods. The lotus seeds on the pods were plump, looking very gratifying. That one tastes pretty good. Do you want to try it? A deep, familiar male voice suddenly rang out by Yun Ruoyan's ear, giving her a fright. Hey, why aren't you making any noise when you walk? Yun Ruoyan turned around and saw Li Mo. She had always been cautious, and even when she was distracted she would quickly snap out of it. It was rare for her to be startled by someone while she was distracted, so when she did she was usually more frightened than most. When Li Mo saw Yun Ruoyan's face suddenly turn white, his heart skipped a beat and he reached out to caress her face. Yun Ruoyan subconsciously tilted her head to the side, and Li Mo's hand landed on empty air. Li Mo raised an eyebrow, but he didn't retract his hand. Instead, he reached out with his other hand and placed both hands on Yun Ruoyan's shoulders, bringing her in front of him and looking down at her. Your Highness. Yun Ruoyan placed her hand on Li Mo's chest, preventing him from getting any closer. Li Mo's lips curled up in a smile. It's only been a few days since we last met, but you've grown distant. Yun Ruoyan raised her head to look at Li Mo. His hair was as black as ink and his face was hidden behind his black robes. His eyes were long and narrow and his pupils were as black as ink. For a moment Yun Ruoyan felt a little dazed. She couldn't help but wonder if the silver-haired, silver-robed man in the forest that night had been a figment of her imagination. You damned girl, how dare you stare blankly at me? Just as Yun Ruoyan was in a daze, Li Mo flicked her forehead. Hey, why did you hit me? Yun Ruoyan clutched her forehead. To help you wake up. Li Mo glanced sideways at her. You didn't come looking for me so early in the morning to daydream, did you? Of course not. Yun Ruoyan blurted out. Li Emo looked at her, waiting for her to continue, but Yun Ruoyan didn't know what to say. Li Emo didn't rush her. Instead, he held her hand and led her into the dining hall. As soon as Li Emo sat down, a maidservant brought over some food, including a portion for Yun Ruoyan. I've already eaten, Yun Ruoyan hurriedly replied. This is a soup made from the lotus seeds in the pond outside. Have a taste. Li Emo raised a jade cup and gestured for Yun Ruoyan to have a taste. Yun Ruoyan had tasted the pastries from the Slaughtering King's manor before. She had been so hungry that she hadn't tasted them in detail, but the taste was still quite good. Yun Ruoyan picked up the jade cup and tasted a spoonful. It was sweet and delicious, and she couldn't help but take a few more bites. Do you want more? Li Emo asked with a smile. Only then did Yun Ruoyan stop eating and look up to see Li Mo's smiling eyes, which made her particularly uncomfortable. Yun Ruoyan felt that Li Emo was a little different today. Unlike in the past, he didn't pounce on her like a hungry tiger, hugging and kissing her. Today he was very polite. Had he recovered from his illness? Or was it something more serious that hadn't yet manifested? Where's sisterly Luo? Yun Ruoyan decided to warm up the atmosphere before making her request. She went to buy some groceries. Li Emo put down the jade cup in his hand and focused on answering her question. I heard that the third prince is here as well. Where's he? He's still drunk and he'll probably only wake up around this time tomorrow. Li Emo smiled at Yun Ruoyan. Only tomorrow? Yun Ruoyan was a little disappointed. I was hoping to ask him for a favor. Li Emo stood up from his seat and sat down by Yun Ruoyan's side. What's the matter? Perhaps I can help you with something. Yun Ruoyan really felt that Li Emo was acting a little strange today, but she liked him very much. Well, I do have something I'd like to ask the Slaughtering King for, Yun Ruoyan finally began. Oh, tell me about it. Li Emo seemed very interested. Yun Ruoyan turned to look at Li Emo. I'd like you to tell my father that our engagement at the flower viewing party is still valid. Of course, as long as my father believes me and doesn't betroth me to anyone else, it'll be fine. Li Emo looked at Yun Ruoyan seriously. That engagement was valid in the first place. Did I say that it wasn't valid? What? Yun Ruoyan's eyes widened. But no one took it seriously. What does that have to do with anyone? Li Emo laughed. If I say it's true, then it's true. If I say it's false, then it's false. It's all up to me. Yun Ruoyan was speechless. Li Emo wasn't wrong. No matter what everyone thought, the Slaughtering King was the one who had the final say. Then is it true or false? Yun Ruoyan once again felt a sense of helplessness. Do you think it's true or false? Yun Ruoyan was flattered that Li Emo was even asking for her opinion today. It can be true for now, but it can be false in the future, Yun Ruoyan replied. That's fine. Li Emo's eyes flashed. But I have a request. Li Emo had been too straightforward for Yun Ruoyan to react. As soon as she heard that he had a request, she quickly asked, What request? Li Emo's lips moved and he whispered something to her. What? Yun Ruoyan didn't hear him clearly and she moved closer to him. I'll say. Li Emo stood up and moved closer to Yun Ruoyan, then quickly placed his hand on the back of Yun Ruoyan's head and pressed her against him. Their warm and soft lips were tightly pressed together. Yun Ruoyan's eyes widened, but she was powerless to resist. Within the Yun manor, Yun Lan sat at the foot of the table while Li Emo sat at the head of the table. According to etiquette, Yun Ruoyan should have stood behind Yun Lan, but Li Emo held onto her hand, refusing to let her leave. Yun Ruoyan sighed. Li Emo was still that sickly Li Emo. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but rejoice. Thankfully, she had informed Yun Lan that he didn't like crowds, and that there wasn't a need for such a grand reception. Otherwise, if Li Emo were to hold her hand in front of everyone, she really wouldn't be able to face anyone. Official Yun, I apologize for my lack of consideration regarding my engagement with Ruoyan. I should have paid you a visit a long time ago, Li Emo began. Slaughtering King, it's understandable that you're busy. Yun Lan smiled. I wouldn't mind marrying Ruoyan at any time, but she hasn't reached the marriageable age yet, so I'll have to trouble you to take care of her for a year. Of course, Yun Lan hurriedly replied. In that case, I'll take my leave now. Liemo stood up. Yunlong hurriedly stood up as well. Your Highness, please stay for a meal. There's no need for that. I'll take Ruoyan out for a stroll. Liemo pulled Yun Ruoyan out of the Yun manor. Where are you taking me? Yun Ruoyan asked as Liemo pulled her into the carriage. Didn't you want to buy poisons? Liemo asked. How did you know? Yun Ruoyan was curious. She didn't recall telling Liemo that she was looking for poison ingredients. Liemo smiled at Yun Ruoyan. Because I can read minds. Chapter 134. Yun Ruoyan didn't know whether or not Liemo could really read her mind, but Liemo really did bring her to a rather secretive underground market. After a short while, Liemo had the coachman get off and drive the carriage himself. Liemo drove the carriage through the secluded alleys of the capital. Yun Ruoyan didn't go out often and she wasn't familiar with the roads, so she felt dizzy after only a few turns. If Liemo were to abandon her now, it would be difficult for her to find her way home. What's the meaning of leading me around in circles? Yun Ruoyan poked her head out of the carriage and shouted. This is a formation. If we don't walk this way, we won't be able to find the entrance to our destination. Liemo didn't even turn his head. What, are you afraid that I'll sell you off? You're so ugly you won't fetch a good price. Yun Ruoyan wanted to say that she was beautiful, but she swallowed her words. If she were to reveal her true appearance, wouldn't she be surrounded by peach blossoms every day? Would she still be able to cultivate? Liemo tilted his head, amused by Yun Ruoyan's indignant but helpless expression. Did you use all the beauty cream I gave you? Liemo asked. Yes. Good. Keep using it and you'll become prettier sooner or later. The carriage finally stopped at a narrow alleyway. Liemo motioned for Yun Ruoyan to alight, then handed her a black robe for her to wear. Liemo found a place by the wall to tie the horses, parked the carriage and led her into the narrow alleyway. The alley was very dark and only a faint light could be seen. At first the alley was wide enough for two people to walk side by side, but gradually, it became narrower and narrower until only one person could walk. Yun Ruoyan followed behind Liemo, looking at his tall back. His ink-black robe seemed to melt into the night. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but reach out to grab the hem of Liemo's robe, but as soon as her hand touched it, she retracted it. Ouch. Just then Liemo suddenly stopped and Yun Ruoyan bumped into his back. Yun Ruoyan's nose turned sour. Just as she was about to flare up, Liemo said, "We're here." Liemo reached into the darkness in front of him, parting it as if he were parting a curtain. Light shone through his hands. At the same time, a clamor could be heard. Partridge grass, thunder god vine, it's free if it's not poisonous. First-grade poison pill. I'm selling it cheaply. There are only 3 venomous fangs of the 3-horned demonic snake left. If you want to buy them, hurry up. Yun Ruoyan bent down and peeked under Liemo's armpit. Outside, the sun was shining brightly and the pedestrians were bustling, no different from a normal market. No, there is a difference. The people here all wore black robes and the things they were selling were all deadly poisons. Where is this? Yun Ruoyan asked curiously. The underground market sells things that can't be bought in the market. Liemo turned around and helped Yun Ruoyan put on her hood, carefully tucking every strand of hair into it. All right, let's go. Liemo pulled Yun Ruoyan out of the alleyway and into the underground market. What are you looking for? Liemo asked. Cicada wings, baji grass, mad matron's flower, gall seeds. Yun Ruoyan listed off 7 or 8 ingredients in a row, all of which Xianxia had given her. Yun Ruoyan had never heard of any of them. How much money did you bring? Liemo asked. 200 taels, Yun Ruoyan replied generously. She had heard from Xianxia that the ingredients required to refine poison grew in miasma, where poisonous insects gathered. It was very difficult to obtain them, so they were even rarer than spiritual herbs, which was why they were so expensive. 200 taels of silver was more than half of Yun Ruoyan's estate, and she had gone to great lengths to get it from Peony. Cicada wings, 2 pairs of cicada wings. Yun Ruoyan suddenly heard someone calling out from a stall to her right. Hey, there's cicada wings over there. Yun Ruoyan struggled out of Liemo's grasp and ran over. Shopkeeper, how much are they? Yun Ruoyan ran up to the stall and asked. Not only was the stall owner dressed in a black robe, but he was also wearing a scarf that covered his face. "Young lady, do you want high-grade, mid-grade or low-grade?" the stall owner asked. What surprised Yunruan was that, although it had been a man's voice when he had called out his wares, it had now become that of an old woman's. Yunruan was surprised, but she didn't show it. "Didn't you say that there were only 2 pairs? Why are there high-grade, mid-grade and low-grade now?" "Oh, there are 2 pairs of high-grade, mid-grade and low-grade," the stall owner explained. The boss explained in a low voice unique to old women, "So there are 6 pairs in total. Which one do you want and how many do you want?" Yunruan turned to look at Li Mo, who was standing by her side. Li Mo crossed his arms and didn't seem to have any intention of speaking. "Well, how much are they?" Yunruan asked. "These are mid-grade cicada wings, 30 taels of silver." "What? 30 taels a pair?" Even though Yunruan had prepared herself mentally, she was still shocked by the price. Her monthly allowance was only 3 taels of silver, but that was more than enough for an average family to live on for half a year. This pair of cicada wings cost 30 taels of silver? Robbery. But what made Yunruan want to vomit blood was yet to come. "I'm sorry, young lady, but it's 30 taels a pair and 60 taels a pair." The stall owner smiled. Oh no, she couldn't see the owner's face, but she could hear that he was smiling. As for whether or not he was mocking her, Yunruan didn't care. She was already shocked by the exorbitant prices of the stall. "Young lady, do you want them?" The stall owner continued smiling. "If you do, I'll give you a discount and give you a low-grade cicada wing." Yunruan was a little conflicted. This was her first time here and she didn't know much about the market. She didn't like the price, but she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to find another stall like this one. Just as she was about to grit her teeth and cut the price, Li Mo pulled her away. "Hey young lady, why aren't you buying anymore? Why don't I give you a discount?" The man's voice came from behind her. "Li Mo, what's the matter?" Yunruan asked as Li Mo dragged her away. Li Mo brought Yunruan to a corner and let go of her. "That's fake." "How is it fake?" Yunruan's eyes widened. "Too cheap. Too cheap." Yunruan's eyes widened even more. Li Mo told Yunruan that because everyone in the underground market disguised their identities, fakes were a common occurrence. Once one bought a fake, there was no way to return it. Poisonous ingredients like the cicada wings cost 80 taels apiece, and there was no room for negotiation. "What? 80 taels apiece?" In that instant Yunruan felt that she was far too poor. All the money she had on her was only enough to buy a pair of green cicada wings. This underground market really didn't treat money as money. Li Mo finally brought Yunruan to a stall in a corner. Behind the stall sat a tall, skinny man wearing a black robe without a hood. Instead, he wore a pitch-black mask that concealed his face. "Mistress, mistress," Xiao called out in Yunruan's mind. "This man is a 5th-rank poisoner. Why would a 5th-rank poisoner be selling his pills in the underground market?" Poisoners were even rarer than pill masters on the Qinyuan continent, and the poison concocted by a 5th-rank poisoner would only be more expensive than the pills concocted by a 5th-rank pillmaster. When the man saw Li Mo stand up from his stool, he bowed slightly, and Li Mo nodded in acknowledgement before he sat down. So the two of them knew each other. Since they knew each other, Yunruan felt more at ease. This stall had almost everything she wanted to buy, but the prices were frighteningly high. Yunruan estimated that it would cost at least 1,200 taels of silver to purchase the ingredients on Qi Qiuqiu's list. That was a whole 1,000 taels short. Li Mo looked at Yunruan's slightly furrowed brow as well as the pained look in her eyes. "If you don't have enough money, you can borrow from me. You don't have to pay me back as long as you agree to one of my requests." Li Mo's warm breath landed on Yunruan's cheek, immediately reminding her of the sudden kiss he had given her in the Slaughtering King's manor. Yunruan hadn't been able to resist Li Mo's advances at all, and she found that she wasn't as repulsed by his intimacy as before. For example, during the kiss that morning, although Yunruan had still pretended to be dead, she was surprised to find that she was starting to get used to Li Mo's intimacy. The Slaughtering King could play with her however he wanted, but she couldn't afford to lose her mind. The Slaughtering King could play with her however he wanted, but she couldn't afford to. As a result, Yunruan blurted out, "No. I wouldn't dare to take advantage of you slaughtering King. Liemo didn't press the issue. Finally, after discussing it with Xiao, Yun Ruoyan used all the money she had on her to purchase some cheap poison refining ingredients. Xiao said that these ingredients could be used to refine some simple poisons, and that she could use them as practice. As for the ingredients on the list, she would buy them when she had enough silver. Just as they were about to leave, Yun Ruoyan saw the black-masked man hand a pitch-black box to Liemo, who put it away with a flip of his hand. Before Yun Ruoyan could pay, Liemo turned and left with her. Yun Ruoyan was in a hurry to return to her training, so the two of them headed straight for the exit. As they passed by a stall, Xiao suddenly called out to her, saying that it had sensed the aura of a poisoned cauldron from the stall next to it. Poisoned cauldrons were cauldrons specifically used to refine poisons. Although most spiritual pills could also be used to refine poisons, the effects of the cauldrons couldn't compare to those used to refine poisons. Mistress, poison refining cauldrons aren't easy to come by, Xiao explained. And judging from the aura, it's a mid-grade cauldron, one that's hard to come by. Yun Ruoyan stopped in her tracks, but her pockets were already empty. What should she do? Chapter 135. When Liemo saw Yun Ruoyan pause, he stopped as well. Why aren't you walking? Yun Ruoyan was extremely reluctant to ask for money, but Xiao spoke again. Master, once you miss it, it will be very difficult to encounter it again. With a medicinal cauldron, refining poisons can be done with half the effort. After a moment's consideration, she made a decision. I'd like to borrow some money. It was a pitch-black medicinal cauldron about 2 feet tall. A cauldron was very different from a furnace. A furnace had a big belly, a 3-legged lid, and a hole on the lid. The spiritual fire burned in the belly of the furnace, and the part of the outer flame with the highest temperature would be exposed through the small hole on the lid to roast the spiritual grass. The cauldron was square, 4-legged, and had no lid. Yun Ruoyan still didn't know where to start the spiritual fire, or where to smelt the ingredients. She would have to wait for Xiao to teach her. 1,000 gold, the stall owner said. Yun Ruoyan's face paled for a moment, but she quickly recovered. In her heart, however, she spat out a mouthful of blood. Without another word, she turned around and left. 1,000 gold coins. He was going to sell her out. According to Liemo, she wasn't worth that much even if she was ugly. Deal. Yun Ruoyan had only taken 2 steps when she heard Liemo speak to the innkeeper behind her. Yun Ruoyan turned around to see Liemo waving a hand at an empty space in his stall, and a pile of shiny gold appeared. The pile of gold only appeared for a moment before the stall owner caught a glimpse of it. The stall owner waved his hand over the pile of gold and the pile of gold disappeared. Yun Ruoyan noticed that both of them were wearing rings on their fingers, storage rings that could only be forged by 5th-rank forgers and above. Although a storage ring couldn't compare to Yun Ruoyan's bracelet, it was still a valuable item on the Qinyuan continent. In the entire Yun family, Yun Ruoyan had only ever seen one on her father's and her grandmother's hands. Liemo then stored the cauldron in his storage ring, and this priceless transaction was completed in the blink of an eye. Liemo dragged the still-dazed Yun Ruoyan away with large strides. Once they were out of the alleyway, Liemo took off the ring on his finger and handed it to Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan looked at the silver ring on Liemo's finger, the only thing on his body that was bright. I don't have that much money to pay you now. Yun Ruoyan didn't rush to take the ring. Tell me your request and I'll see if I can fulfill it. Liemo bowed closer to Yun Ruoyan and she subconsciously stepped back. Liemo chuckled. My request is simple as long as... Liemo suddenly approached him again. Yun Ruoyan almost toppled over. Liemo wrapped an arm around her waist, pulled her into his embrace and kissed her. On this deserted path, Liemo embraced Yun Ruoyan, but it was limited to the contact of their lips, not as deep or forceful as Yun Ruoyan had feared. Although Yun Ruoyan was still a young girl in this life, she had experienced many things in her past life. She could feel Liemo's restraint and gentleness. She wasn't sure if she was imagining things, but from this kiss she could sense that Liemo was different. In the past, Li Mo's kisses had been careless, playful and taunting as if she were a tasty toy. Now however Li Mo was gentle and restrained. Yun Ruoyan opened her eyes and looked at Li Mo, who was inches away from her. His high nose bridge, his narrow ink-black eyes, and his long eyelashes trembling slightly. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but think of a silver-haired, silver-browed man, and a pair of ice-blue eyes beneath those silver eyelashes. Yun Ruoyan's mind began to wander. Were these two the same person? My request for Yenner is. Li Mo finally left Yun Ruoyan's lips. He looked at Yun Ruoyan's open eyes with satisfaction and in a low, magnetic voice he said, "When I kiss you, don't close your eyes and don't pretend to be dead." Yun Ruoyan froze. Li Mo pulled her hand over and put the ring on her finger. "I'll pay you back as soon as possible," Yun Ruoyan whispered. The two of them boarded the carriage and Li Mo drove it out of the alleyway. Yun Ruoyan poked her head out of the carriage and asked Li Mo if he could send her back to the Yun Manor right away. Suddenly Yun Ruoyan's stomach began to protest. Noon had already passed and Yun Ruoyan's breakfast had long since been consumed. Because of her hard work she had an especially large appetite and she was especially prone to hunger. If she didn't eat her stomach would beat like a drum. This wasn't the first time Li Mo had heard Yun Ruoyan's stomach growl. He had seen it in the Forest of Dead Souls. As he looked at Yun Ruoyan's blushing face, he stopped the carriage in front of a nearby restaurant. The two of them ordered some food and wine, then went up to a private room on the second floor and sat by the window. Before long the food and wine were served, and Yun Ruoyan began to worship her own bowels. Li Mo only took a small sip of wine before putting it down and watching Yun Ruoyan eat. Yun Ruoyan was enjoying her meal when she felt Li Mo's gaze on her. "Why aren't you eating?" "I'm not hungry and it's not to my taste." In the morning at the Slaughtering King's Manor, Li Mo had only eaten a few mouthfuls of lotus seed soup. If even a petite girl like her was hungry, shouldn't a tall man like Li Mo be even hungrier? Not to her taste? Yun Ruoyan picked up a piece of braised pork and bit into it. It was fatty but not greasy, sweet, salty and tasty. When Li Mo saw that Yun Ruoyan was enjoying the meat, he couldn't help but pick up a piece as well. However, just looking at the glossy meat he was already full. As a result he placed that piece of meat into Yun Ruoyan's bowl. "I heard from my master that once you reach a certain level of cultivation, you'll be able to use spiritual energy to replenish your body, and you won't need to eat anymore. Is that true?" Yun Ruoyan asked. Li Mo nodded. "Once a blade master reaches 9th rank, they'll be a sword saint and from then on, they'll be able to abstain from eating." A sword saint. This was the first time Yun Ruoyan had heard of such a thing. As far as she knew 9th rank was the highest level of spiritual energy cultivation, and she hadn't expected there to be a sword saint. "What's a sword saint? Are you a sword saint?" Yun Ruoyan was so shocked and curious that she couldn't be bothered to eat anymore. Instead she looked at Li Mo with bright eyes. "I'm only infinitely close to a sword saint. Most people only know that a blade master can reach 9th rank, and very few know about the sword saint realm. In fact, one can continue to cultivate after that." Yun Ruoyan looked at Li Mo waiting for him to continue. However, Li Mo had no intention of continuing. "With your current cultivation there's no point in knowing so much. Let's talk about it when you're a 9th rank blade master." If Li Mo didn't want to talk about it, Yun Ruoyan wouldn't be able to get any answers no matter how curious she was. "I'll ask Qiuqiu when I get back tonight. It knows so much, I'm sure it knows about this," Yun Ruoyan thought. Yun Ruoyan lowered her head and continued eating. Li Mo watched Yun Ruoyan eat with a smile on his face, as if this was something very interesting. Slowly Yun Ruoyan got used to his gaze. She ate and drank as she pleased. After finishing her meal, Yun Ruoyan put down her bowl and chopsticks. "There's something very important that I think I should tell you." "Oh, what is it?" Li Mo motioned for her to continue. Yun Ruoyan recalled what Yun Moxiao had told her on the way back to her cottage last night about whether or not the far-sighted king would rebel. She was certain that Zhuo Yifeng wouldn't lie to her, but there was no reason for Yun Lan to lie to help the far-sighted king. Even now Yun Ruoyan couldn't figure this out. "I've received some news," Yun Ruoyan continued. "It means that the far-sighted king intends to rebel, and that he's been preparing for it for many years. No one knows when he'll make his move." Yun Ruoyan looked at Li Mo, but he didn't seem to have much of a reaction. But my father said that the far-sighted king voluntarily relinquished his right to the throne, so there's no reason for him to rebel. Based on your understanding of the far-sighted king, do you think he'll rebel? If you're not sure, should we report this matter to the emperor? As the king of this kingdom, Li Mo was surprisingly calm about this matter. Ignore him, Li Mo replied coolly. Yun Ruoyan was surprised. Ignore him? What do you mean? Just then a waiter arrived with tea. Chapter 136. Some are the same and some are different, Xiu replied. Xiu replied, the difference between elixirs and poisons is that elixirs only have one form, which is a solid pill. Poisons, on the other hand, can come in many different forms: solid, liquid, gaseous, and powdery. Xiu told Yun Ruoyan that, like spiritual pills, poisons also required a specific container after they were refined, and that such a container would cost a large sum of money. This made Yun Ruoyan's need for money even more urgent. The more expensive the ingredients, the more valuable the pills and poisons will be, Xiu said. Master, as long as you learn how to refine medicine and poison, earning money won't be a problem. Under Xiu's guidance, Yun Ruoyan began her first attempt at refining poison. A 2-foot-tall cauldron was placed in the middle of the room. It was smaller than the cauldron in the Lin family's pill-making chambers, but larger than Yun Ruoyan's high-grade furnace. When I refine spiritual pills, I need to drip my blood into the furnace so that it can familiarize itself with my aura. Do I need to do the same for this cauldron? However, Xiu said no. The difference between refining pills and poisons is that the latter requires a high level of spiritual energy. Only those with a high level of spiritual energy will be able to refine pills that are rich in spiritual energy. The former, on the other hand, requires a high level of refinement and ingredients. As for spiritual energy, one only needs to be able to use a yellow spiritual flame, and as long as the refinement method and ingredients are poisonous enough, the resulting poison will also be poisonous enough. This was one of the reasons why some alchemists embarked on the path of refining poison. If a blade master couldn't become a 7th-rank blade master but had the talent to become a pill master, then becoming a poisoner would be a shortcut to becoming a strong cultivator. There were also those who had already become a pill master, but were unable to raise their cultivation, and thus were unable to refine high-grade spiritual pills. Possessing the title of a pill master but lacking the ability to do so, made it easy for them to be challenged. Those who failed in a challenge would often have their reputations tarnished, and some would even fall into a coma. Even if they failed in a duel, it was easy for them to become a poisoner. High-ranked poison masters who could master such poisons were often able to kill without leaving a trace, and even 9th-rank blade masters feared them. Xiu, there's something I don't understand, Yun Ruoyan began. Master, what do you not understand? Since a poisoner doesn't have a high requirement for spiritual energy, why do you have to wait until I'm a 5th-rank spiritualist before you can refine that book for me? Yun Ruoyan asked. Yun Ruoyan had always thought that Xiu didn't allow her to concoct the poison on Poison Tyrant because her cultivation wasn't high enough. But from what Xiu was saying, it seemed that concocting poison didn't require a high level of spiritual energy. In that case, Yun Ruoyan could definitely concoct the most powerful poison in the world. Xiu's reply surprised Yun Ruoyan. It said that the poison in the Overlord of the world was too powerful, and that if he could refine all of its poisons he would be invincible on the Qinyuan continent. The temptation of such a method that did not require much effort and yet could allow one to quickly become stronger was too great. Almost everyone, after refining the poison on the World Poison Overlord, couldn't help but give up all other cultivation, and in the end, became a weakling who only knew how to refine poison. If simply releasing poison could destroy an enemy, who would hate to use their spiritual energy to defeat them? Xiu didn't want Yun Ruoyan to become such a weakling, so before Yun Ruoyan was strong enough, it wouldn't impart the Overlord of the World poison to her. Xiu's goal in teaching Yun Ruoyan how to refine poison wasn't so that she could become stronger through it. Rather, it wanted Yun Ruoyan to learn how to refine antidotes after learning how to refine poison, so that she wouldn't be so easily affected by poison. At the same time, It would also allow her to have a life-saving talisman if she were to encounter a powerful opponent before she was strong enough. In short, Xianxia wanted Yun Ruoyan to live safely when she wasn't strong enough. The poison that Xianxia was going to teach Yun Ruoyan was fairly simple. It had Yun Ruoyan place the ingredients she'd bought into the cauldron, then use spiritual fire to heat the bottom of the cauldron. Once the fire reached a certain temperature, the opening of the cauldron would automatically form a mist barrier that sealed the cauldron's mouth. As the spiritual fire burned, the mist became thinner and thinner, and by the time it dissipated, the ingredients had already been refined into a liquid form. At this point, Yun Ruoyan could choose the form of the poison she wanted to refine. If she wanted the liquid form, she could directly put it into a bottle. If she wanted the solid form, she would have to use spiritual energy to activate the mist barrier at the mouth of the cauldron again, and then continue to use spiritual fire to refine it. When the mist barrier thinned a second time, pills would form within the cauldron. If she wanted the poison in a gaseous form, she would have to activate the mist again to refine it. At this point, not only would the mist not dissipate, but it would also become thicker and thicker. When the mist barrier was so thick that it was about to overflow, she would have to use a special container to collect it. Xianxia, are you sure? Yun Ruoyan couldn't quite believe Xianxia's words. No, she couldn't believe how fast her cultivation had progressed. In less than 2 months, not only had she become a pill master, but she had also broken through the bottleneck of 3rd rank and was on the verge of becoming a 4th rank pill master. Whether it was a blade master, a pill master, a forge master, or a summoner, every 3 ranks represented a major bottleneck, and almost every rank would have a minor bottleneck. Yun Ruoyan had only been stuck at the bottleneck of 3rd rank for 3 years, and that was because she had been poisoned. From then on, it was as if Yun Ruoyan's cultivation had gone smoothly. In particular, Lin Zainan had only broken through to the 4th rank at the age of 30. This was already quite a feat for a pill master, and he'd only broken through to the 4th rank at the age of 30. But Yun Ruoyan in just 2 short months had accomplished a goal that most people would take 10 years to achieve. This made her feel as if a pie had fallen from the heavens, and she didn't even have time to be surprised. What Yun Ruoyan didn't know was that there were many factors that had contributed to her frightening rate of cultivation. First of all, her cultivation as a blade master had improved by leaps and bounds. At her age, she had become a 7th rank blade master, and her spiritual vortex had also expanded, providing her with sufficient spiritual energy to refine pills. Then there was the silver bracelet's pocket dimension, which subtly catalyzed the fire element in her spiritual energy, allowing her to evolve her spiritual flame with twice the effort for half the result. Finally, there was her freakish human furnace constitution. For someone with such a constitution, there was no such thing as a bottleneck. Xianxia knew of these 3 reasons, but it couldn't explain them to Yun Ruoyan. All it knew was that cultivation was a mysterious thing, and that some people could progress so quickly without reason. However, after such an explosive growth, there was a high chance that her cultivation would stagnate. Yun Ruoyan had to cultivate as quickly as possible, and she couldn't afford to let her guard down. Yun Ruoyan didn't have time to be surprised by Xianxia's warning, and hurriedly resumed her cultivation. Mistress, will be refining the antidote next. Are you ready? Xianxia asked. Chapter 137. Yun Ruoyan closed her eyes and looked through the locations of the ingredients she would need in the bracelet, ensuring that she would be able to take them out whenever she needed them. Done. Yun Ruoyan nodded. She ignited the cauldron and followed Xianxia's instructions to toss in the ingredients. The spiritual flame flickered between red, orange, and yellow. Alright, put in the ingredients I told you to leave behind for the soul-stealing pill, Xianxia began. The lower the grade of the poison, the more troublesome it is to concoct. At first, Yun Ruoyan didn't understand why Xianxia had told her to leave behind a few ingredients for the soul-stealing pill. But now she understood. In order to concoct an antidote, you need to add in some of the ingredients to stimulate the antidote's effects. Mistress. Xianxia raised her voice. Now focus your energy on turning the spiritual flame green, and you'll be able to obtain a mid-grade antidote. Yun Ruoyan stared intently at the spiritual flame in the cauldron, pushing her spiritual energy to the limit. The yellow spiritual fire in the furnace burned brighter and brighter. It gradually turned from yellow to white, and then a cyan light gradually appeared. "Mistress, you've broken through," Yun Ruoyan murmured as she looked at the green flame in the cauldron. "I've broken through, I'm a 4th-rank pillmaster now." Although Yun Ruoyan had been on the verge of a breakthrough, she couldn't help but feel excited. 2 years later she would be competing against the genius pillmaster of the Wang family, Wang Meng, and she would have a better chance of winning. Yun Ruoyan reached out and retrieved a green pill from the cauldron. Xiao evaluated it as a mid-grade antidote, but it wasn't bad at all. Only then did Yun Ruoyan put the antidote away. The next day Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao went to the Lin Manor to visit Zhou Yifeng and Zhuo Lin. Yun Maxiao told Yun Ruoyan that Zhuo Lin was almost fully recovered under Lin Qingqian's care, and that she was living with her brother in a cottage near the bamboo garden. When Yun Ruoyan arrived, Zhuo Lin was just about to head to the bamboo garden to help look after Lin Qingqian's magical beasts when she bumped into the siblings. "Where's your brother?" Yun Ruoyan asked. Although Zhuo Lin's complexion was much better, her body was still very weak. She was wearing a light cyan chiffon dress and looked like a leaf. If the wind was slightly stronger she would be blown away by the wind. He couldn't help but feel sorry for her. "Xianxia is here. My brother's teaching her the sword," Zhuo Lin replied. Zhuo Lin addressed both Yun Ruoyan and Lin Qingqian as sisters, but only casually addressed Lin Xianxia by her pet name. Although Lin Xianxia was slightly older than Zhuo Lin, the two of them often quarreled and Zhuo Lin would call her by her full name at first. Now that she was used to it, she just dropped her surname to appear more intimate. Yun Ruoyan took Zhuo Lin's hand and led her back to the garden. "Brother, Xianxia, sister Ruoyan's here." Zhuo Lin called out to the two girls practicing in the yard. Lin Xianxia and Zhou Yifeng both turned to look at Yun Ruoyan. At this time Zhou Yifeng was teaching Lin Xianxia how to nock an arrow, but Lin Xianxia's movements were always erratic, and the arrows she shot would often miss their target. Zhou Yifeng held her in his arms as he taught her how to draw a bow and shoot an arrow. To an outsider this posture seemed rather intimate. Yun Ruoyan looked at the two of them with a smile. Meeting Yun Ruoyan's gaze, Lin Xianxia, who was usually thick-skinned and rarely embarrassed, blushed slightly. Zhou Yifeng hurriedly let go of Lin Xianxia's hand and stood to the side with his bow. He had also changed out of his coarse robes and into a dark green cotton robe, looking like a very clean and refreshing man. Coupled with his bright, spirited eyes, it was no wonder that Lin Xianxia's heart had fallen for him. Yun Ruoyan, who had never liked gossiping, couldn't help but start gossiping in her heart. Seeing Yun Ruoyan's meaningful smile, Lin Xianxia ran over and tugged on Yun Ruoyan's other hand. "Sister Ruoyan, you haven't come to play in a few days. I was bored so I asked Brother Zhuo to teach me archery." "Good." Yun Ruoyan looked at Lin Xianxia's cute round face. "You have to learn from your brother Zhuo, and when you're done I'll give you a good bow." That's great, that's great." Lin Xianxia jumped up and down happily before running over to Zhou Yifeng. "Brother Zhuo, let's continue practicing." Zhou Yifeng handed the bow to Lin Xianxia. "Why don't you practice by yourself first? I'm going to the bamboo garden. Your sister said that she's going to the apothecary today, and she wants me to head over early to look after the beasts." As soon as she heard that she was going to the bamboo garden, Lin Xianxia's face immediately turned bitter. The only place in the Lin family that she didn't dare to go to was Lin Qingqian's bamboo garden. Thinking of all the strange beasts there, Lin Qingxia's hair stood on end. Zhou Yifeng seemed to know this weakness of Lin Qingxia's. Somewhat amused, he stuffed the bow in his hand into her hands, then bade farewell to Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao. The group turned and walked out of the cottage, heading toward the bamboo garden by the side. Hey, wait for me, wait for me." Lin Xianxia's voice came from behind them. Yun Ruoyan turned around and smiled at Lin Xianxia, who had caught up to them. "You're not planning on following us to the bamboo garden, are you? Aren't you afraid of the little things in there?" "Who said I'm afraid?" Lin Xianxia straightened her back. I just don't like how ugly they are." The others couldn't help but laugh at her excuse. Lin Qingqian picked up the basin and walked toward the hut, the two girls following behind her. Are you going to keep standing? Just as they were about to reach the door, Lin Qingchen turned around and smiled at Lin Qingxue. Lin Qingxue was just about to walk toward the hut when Whitey flipped over in the water, revealing more than half of its body above the surface of the water. Lin Qingxue was so shocked by this sudden turn of events that her raised leg froze in midair. Little White went back into the water and the water splashed into the pond next to it, creating a huge splash. Along with the splashing of water, the catfish's giggles and cries of protest could be heard. There was also the commotion of the beasts that hadn't eaten yet, and the entire bamboo forest was bustling with activity. I'll wait for you outside. Lin Qingshue's face turned green as she turned and ran off. Lin Qingchen and Yun Ruoyan looked at each other and shook their heads. Sister Ruoyan, cousin Xiao. Lin Qingchen placed the basin on a shelf and turned to Yun Ruoyan and Yun Moxiao, her expression serious. These past few days I've noticed quite a few suspicious people around the manor and the apothecary. I wonder if they've been sent by the far-sighted king to find Brother Zhou. Yun Ruoyan and Yun Moxiao looked at each other. It's highly possible, Yun Ruoyan replied. Why don't we capture one of them for questioning? Lin Qingchen suggested. It's best not to, Yun Moxiao replied. If we alert them, the far-sighted king will surely send more experts, and that'll be even more disadvantageous for us. Then what should we do? Yun Ruoyan and Lin Qingchen looked toward their brother. Chapter 138. Actually, Yun Moxiao had begun to doubt Zhou Yifeng's words after hearing Yun Lan's words. But if the suspicious people Lin Qingchen had mentioned were really sent by the far-sighted king, then Zhou Yifeng's words were believable. As for why the far-sighted king had abdicated the throne and plotted a rebellion, the mystery was still unknown. Call the Zhou siblings over. We need to discuss this matter together, Yun Moxiao ordered. Lin Qingchen called Zhou Yifeng and Zhou Lin'er into her room, and they sat down to discuss the matter. When Zhou Yifeng heard about the suspicious men near the Lin Manor and the apothecary, his expression turned serious. He must have been sent by the far-sighted king to find me. Zhou Yifeng looked at Lin Qingchen. Will this cause trouble for the Lin family? The far-sighted king was a king of the Li kingdom, and now that Zhou Yifeng was being targeted by him, the Lin family was clearly opposing the far-sighted king. Zhou Yifeng was worried that he would cause trouble for the Lin family. Lin Qingchen shook her head. The Lin family has some status in the capital, so you don't have to worry about that. Although the Lin family wasn't as powerful as it used to be, its century-old reputation was still there. Without sufficient reason, no one would dare to make a move against them openly. However, no one could guarantee that they wouldn't do something behind the scenes. Even if they did, the Lin family wouldn't be afraid. Those people don't dare to come to the Lin Manor openly, so they can only linger around the Lin Manor, hoping to investigate, Yun Moxiao explained. But the Lin family has always lived in seclusion, so they can only wait around the manor and the apothecary. Yun Ruoyan nodded. I'm guessing that those people aren't just loitering around the apothecary. Qingxue must have been followed as well, but Qingchen was quick enough to discover them. Zhou Yifeng stood up. We can't stay here any longer. Zhou Yifeng had seen the far-sighted king's shrewdness before. For an ambitious man to disguise himself as a virtuous and impoverished king for a decade or two at a time was truly frightening. If he were to become enemies with such a person, even if he didn't deal with him for the time being, he would surely seek revenge in the future. Zhou Yifeng was worried that he would bring trouble to the Lin family. Don't worry, Brother Zhou. Yun Moxiao stood up and patted Zhou Yifeng on the shoulder. There's another reason why King Ming doesn't dare to act rashly, other than the Lin family. He wasn't sure if Zhou Yifeng had discovered their secret, but Zhou Yifeng's sudden departure made him feel uneasy. Therefore there is no need for us to act recklessly. Brother, do you have an idea? Yun Ruoyan looked at her brother. My idea is to wait and see. Yun Moxiao said, since the far-sighted king isn't sure, let's just pretend that nothing happened and continue doing what we were doing. Because of this, Ming Wang is even more uncertain, so he doesn't dare to act blindly without thinking. Yun Moxiao's suggestion was similar to Li Mo's. It's just that Brother Zhou and your sister shouldn't go out for the time being. They don't dare to enter the Lin mansion because they don't want to make a big deal out of it. But if you go out, it won't be a problem to kidnap you without anyone knowing, Yun Xiao said. The conclusion of the discussion was that the Zhou siblings should stay put, while the rest of the family would continue to do as they had in the past. After the discussion, the Zhou siblings would remain in the bamboo grove to look after Lin Zainan, while the rest of the family left the grove to pay their respects to Lin Zainan. Unable to find Lin Zainan in his study, they turned to his pill-making chambers, only to find that he wasn't there either. Lin Zainan hadn't left the house in a long time, and was usually either in his study or in his pill-making chambers. Given the size of the Lin household, they really didn't know where to look for him. Just as they were about to leave, they saw Lin Bo emerge from a small path. "Young master, Miss Yun," Uncle Lin greeted the two of them. "Uncle Lin, have you seen grandfather?" Lin Xianxia asked. "He's in the peach blossom grove right now. He told me to bring some wine over, then told me to come back saying that he wanted some time alone," Lin Bo replied. "What's wrong with grandfather today?" Lin Xianxia asked curiously. In his youth, Lin Zainan had been fond of wine, and his family had a large collection of it. In recent years, however, he had rarely drunk. The last time he drank was to celebrate Yun Xiao's return. Today didn't seem to be a special day, so why was he drinking so early in the morning? From Lin Bo's tone, Lin Zainan didn't seem to be in a good mood. Was there something troubling him? Everyone looked doubtful. "I've made some headway in the matter that master had me investigate," Lin Bo replied. "This morning I reported everything to him." "Is it about my mother?" Yun Ruoyan asked after a moment's hesitation. Uncle Lin nodded, and the others all had a sorrowful look on their faces. "Since master's in a bad mood, why don't you go keep him company?" Lin Bo left. The group followed the path to the Peach Blossom Grove. The Lin Manor's Peach Blossom Grove was planted on a plot of land rich in spiritual energy, so its blooming period was much longer than in other places. Generally, it would bloom from the third month of spring until autumn, when the ground was covered in fallen leaves. Even when the spiritual energy was particularly abundant, the blossoms would still be gorgeous when it snowed. Usually Yun Ruoyan didn't like coming here because the peach blossoms and even the scent of the peach blossoms would remind her of that dream where Lin Yueme had danced amidst the peach blossoms and vomited blood. Although it was only a dream, it had truly happened. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but shudder every time she thought of it. From the moment they entered the grove, Yun Ruoyan clenched her fists tightly. As if sensing her nervousness, Yun Xiao placed his large hand lightly on her shoulder. As soon as they entered the grove, they saw Lin Zainan sitting alone at a stone table. Beneath the gorgeous peach blossoms, Lin Zainan, dressed in a white robe, was drinking alone, his expression forlorn. "Grandfather! Grandfather!" The group couldn't help but feel a lump in their throat when they saw him. Lin Zainan raised his head to look at the children. He was momentarily stunned, but a loving smile quickly appeared on his face. "Xiao, Ruoyan Xianxia, what are you doing here?" Lin Zainan smiled and waved at them. They walked up to the stone table and sat down. "Grandfather, I'll drink with you." Yun Xiao picked up Lin Zainan's empty cup, poured himself a cup and drained it in one gulp. "All right." Lin Zainan took Yun Xiao's cup and also drained it in one gulp. "Good." Yun Xiao laughed as well, then filled Lin Zainan's cup with his own. Lin Qingchen wanted to stop them from drinking too much, but Yun Ruoyan tugged at her hand, motioning for her not to stop them. She knew that the reason Yun Xiao was drinking with Lin Zainan was so that the latter could vent his frustrations. Drinking like Lin Zainan had done before would be detrimental to his health, but drinking to one's heart's content was much more carefree. After a few rounds, Lin Zainan's face began to turn red, but he seemed to be in better spirits. "Grandfather, I can't take it anymore." Seeing that Lin Zainan was slightly tipsy, Yun Xiao knew that it was about time. "Grandfather, I can't take it anymore." "That's true, my grandfather was a man who could drink 1,000 cups without getting drunk. No one in the entire capital, no, the entire Qinyuan continent was his match," Lin Qingxua hurriedly said, causing Lin Zainan to burst into laughter again. "Xiao, Ruoyan." Lin Zainan put down his cup and looked at the two girls. "I had Lin Bo investigate the shamanic tribe and we've made some progress." Yun Ruoyan and Yun Xiao glanced at each other, their eyes flashing. Although Lin Qingchen and Lin Qingxua didn't know about this, they could tell from the three girls' tone and expressions that it was important. They held their breaths and listened carefully. Lin Bo sent people to investigate the entire capital and all the nearby temples, and indeed they found a temple called the Hidden Spirit Temple, where the reincarnation of the Buddha is worshipped, Lin Zainan continued. After further investigation, it was confirmed that the temple was built by a descendant of the shamanic tribe. Grandfather, does that mean that the poison mother was poisoned with originated from that temple? Yun Ma Xiao clenched his fists tightly on the stone table. Lin Zainan didn't speak but he nodded affirmatively. Chapter 139. Embroidered on the pink sachet was a flower she hadn't seen before. It was leafless and its petals were slender and fiery red. It looked a little like a chrysanthemum's petals, but they were even more dazzling as if they had a life of their own. As Yun Ma Xiao looked at the sachet, his expression softened. Yun Ruoyan was curious. Her brother had grown up in the army and logically speaking he shouldn't have had many opportunities to interact with women. In the past few days he hadn't attended any banquets, so he didn't have the slightest interaction with any of the women. So whose sachet was this? Brother. Yun Ruoyan suddenly called out to her brother. As soon as he raised his head, he saw Yun Ruoyan staring at him with her large bright eyes. Yun Ruoyan was both concerned and curious. She and her brother didn't have to hold back, so she asked directly. Which girl made that sachet? Yun Ruoyan's question caught Lin Qingqian's attention, and she turned her gaze to the sachet in Yun Ma Xiao's hands. A leafless flower, Lin Qingqian blurted out. Qingqian, you recognize this flower? You said it's a leafless flower? Yun Ruoyan and Yun Ma Xiao exclaimed in unison. Yun Ruoyan turned to Yun Ma Xiao and saw that he was also looking at Lin Qingqian curiously, and she knew that he didn't recognize this flower either. The leafless flower is the Beastkin's national flower. It's an extremely rare flower that grows on the Yueli Mountains, and it can be eaten as well as used for healing and detoxification, Lin Qingqian explained. The conditions for its growth are extremely stringent, and only the Beastkin once knew how to raise it, but that method has long since been lost. As a result, most people don't know about this flower, and even Brother Zhou and the others have only heard of it. Oh, so that's how it is. Yun Ma Xiao turned his gaze back to the sachet. I thought I was ignorant, but it turns out to be a rare species. Qingqian, you sure know a lot, Yun Ruoyan praised her sincerely. She knew that, although Lin Qingqian's talent as a pill master wasn't particularly high, she was no less hardworking than she was. Lin Zainan had once told Lin Qingqian that concocting spiritual herbs required a high talent for pill making, as well as an extremely high cultivation as a blade master. Given her talent, it would be difficult for her to achieve anything in this area. Thus, after Lin Qingqian accepted this reality, she began to work hard in the direction of theory and the direction of alchemy. She studied the knowledge of all kinds of spiritual herbs, hoping that even if she didn't have the ability to condense high-grade spiritual herbs, one day she would be able to create a new low-grade, mid-grade, or even high-grade spiritual herb condensation method. This was the goal she worked hard for. However, Lin Qingqian had only read about the leafless flower in books about beasts. Ever since meeting the Zhou siblings, Lin Qingqian had developed an interest in the beast race. She'd read many books about their origins and their eventual decline. By now, Lin Qingqian was quite familiar with the beastkin. Lin Qingqian's gaze also landed on the sachet. She could see that the flower on the sachet was extremely lifelike, both in color and shape. Although she hadn't seen it before, she could immediately tell that it was indeed a leafless flower. The flower on this sachet doesn't look like it was embroidered according to the descriptions in the books, Lin Qingqian began. Rather, it's someone who's seen a leafless flower with their own eyes. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to imitate the flower's spiritual energy. Yun Ma Xiao's expression was one of surprise. Brother, who could have done this? I'm more than a little curious. I'm curious as well, Lin Qingqian replied. Not only am I curious, but I'd also like to pay a visit to the person who's seen a leafless flower. The two sisters turned to Yun Ma Xiao, waiting for him to answer their curiosity. Yun Ma Xiao smiled helplessly. I'm curious as well because I don't know who the owner of this sachet is. On the day that Yun Ruoyan had left for the Slaughtering King's Manor, Yun Maxiao had seen her carriage on the streets. Worried he'd followed it. However, on his way to Yun Ruoyan's carriage, he'd been ambushed by a group of black-clothed men. Their cultivations were extremely high, and Yun Maxiao, as an 8th-rank blade master, was clearly no match for them. Fortunately, the group of black-clothed men hadn't intended to harm him. After trapping him for a while, they retreated and Yun Maxiao lost track of the carriage. I wasn't familiar with the capital, and not only did I lose track of Ruoyan's carriage, but I also lost my way. Yun Maxiao laughed self-deprecatingly. Just as I was about to ask someone for directions, a mutant fire horse suddenly charged toward me. The horse went out of control and hit many people along the way. There was a little girl not far in front of me. I saw that the mutated horse was about to step on her, but I couldn't save her in time. Right at this moment, a masked woman in green suddenly appeared and saved the little girl from under the hooves of the horse. The woman had saved the little girl, but she'd placed herself under the horse's hooves. However, she'd bought Yun Maxiao enough time to subdue the fire horse and save the woman. The woman didn't say much to Yun Maxiao. After thanking him briefly, she turned and left. This is what I found on the ground after the girl left. This is what she left behind, Yun Maxiao said, waving the sachet in his hand. Brother, how can you be so sure that this was left behind by the girl? Yun Ruoyan smiled. It must have been chaotic at the time and someone else might have left it behind. Because of the scent. The scent on this sachet is the same as the girl's, Yun Maxiao replied without hesitation. As soon as he said this, Yun Maxiao felt that it was inappropriate. This was the first time he'd done something like talking about a girl's scent in front of others. He couldn't help but blush slightly. Yun Ruoyan and Lin Qingchen looked at each other and smiled. Yun Ruoyan sighed. Her handsome brother, who'd always looked down on ordinary girls, was finally about to have his first awakening of love. But then Yun Ruoyan began to worry. If she didn't know who the girl was, even if he did awaken, it would only be a fleeting crush. She couldn't stand by and watch her brother's fate be obstructed. Brother, what did the girl look like? Was she beautiful? Yun Ruoyan asked. I don't know. She was wearing a veil. Yun Ruoyan frowned. How old does that woman look? I don't know, but she didn't look very old. Yun Ruoyan's frown deepened. In that case, based on her accent, was she from the capital? Yun Maxiao thought back. I don't know. It was too noisy at the time, so I didn't pay attention. Yun Ruoyan's brows furrowed tightly. It was a problem if she couldn't grasp the moment of fate. Young Master Miss, Fu's voice rang out from outside the carriage. We've arrived at the apothecary. The three of them alighted from the carriage. As soon as they did, Yun Ruoyan noticed a stall on the west side of the street, a candy seller on the east side, and 3 beggars on the opposite side of the street, who would occasionally glance at them with shifty eyes. Yun Ruoyan tugged on Lin Qingchen's sleeve, and Lin Qingchen nodded slightly at her, indicating that these were the suspicious people she had mentioned. Lin Qingchen leaned close to Yun Ruoyan's ear and whispered, the ones around the Lin Manor would still hide their tracks, but the ones here are much more obvious. Let's go in. Yun Maxiao clasped his hands behind his back and looked straight ahead. The apothecary was located on a relatively secluded street in the southern part of the capital. But because of its existence, this relatively secluded street was bustling with activity. Although it was only noon and some of the night vendors hadn't yet opened for business, the apothecary was already bustling with activity. When Lin Qingchen entered the apothecary, she had already put on a veil. Although the women of the Qinyuan continent weren't restricted or conservative, some of the more reserved ones still preferred to cover their pretty faces. Even the most flamboyant women would wear the half-veil that Lin Qingchen had created for Yun Ruoyan when they went out. This way, even the tomboyish ones would look a little more feminine and reserved. The apothecary's main hall had 4 areas for consultation, and there were still many people waiting in line. Those who had finished their consultation would take a physician's prescription and head to the medicine cabinets at the back of the hall to find an apprentice to fill up their prescriptions. There were also people in charge of maintaining order and answering patients' questions. As a result, even though there were many people in the hall, it was quiet and orderly. Miss, you're here. A middle-aged man with a long beard and a navy blue robe walked up to greet her. Yun Ruoyan recognized him as the manager of the apothecary. Zhong Bo, I'll show my cousins around. You don't have to bother with us, Zhong Bo, Lin Qingchen replied. Zhong Bo had an impression of Yun Ruoyan, but he didn't recognize Yun Moxiao. He couldn't help but glance at him a few more times before nodding and leaving. Qingchen, are you in charge of the entire apothecary now? Yun Ruoyan asked as she looked around. The last time Yun Ruoyan had been to the apothecary, it had still been on the busiest street in the capital, and Lin Zainan had personally managed it. She remembered that there were only 2 consultation areas in the apothecary at the time, and when there were too many people the queue would stretch all the way to the street outside, causing traffic jams. Although the apothecary had moved to a more secluded street, the number of patients had only increased. However, it was no longer crowded or chaotic, and the efficiency of consultation had greatly increased. Yun Ruoyan looked at her younger sister, who was even more petite than herself, and her heart was filled with admiration. Yun Ruoyan had been reborn and her mental age was at least 30. On the other hand, Lin Qingchen was only 12 years old and yet she was so capable. Sister Ruoyan, look. Lin Qingchen pointed at a man behind the counter dressed in the apothecary's uniform, who was swiftly filling up a patient's medicine. Yun Ruoyan watched as he nimbly took out 5 sheets of yellow paper and laid them flat on the counter. Then he glanced at the patient's prescription and began filling up the medicine. His fingers were slender and flexible. He only needed 2 handfuls at most to open the drawer and grab a medicine. Then he evenly distributed the medicine in the medicine cabinet on 5 pieces of yellow paper. He did this 8 times in a row until he had all the medicine. He didn't even look at the prescription. Not only did such a technique require a high degree of familiarity with the herbs, but it also required a superb memory. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but nod in praise. He's Sister Rongyan's maid Ling Lan's brother, Lin Qingchen began. His name is Che Mingchen. When I was free I made a few low-grade pills. I'd like to sell them but I'm not sure what the market price is right now. Ruoyan, do you need money? Ruoyan, do you need money? Lin Qingchen and Yun Moxiao asked almost at the same time. Unless one was in dire need of money or specialized in dealing with spiritual herbs, no one would sell spiritual herbs so casually. Very lacking. No, not at all. Yun Ruoyan hurriedly waved her hands. I just don't know the price of spiritual herbs, so I'm curious to see how much they're worth. I'd also like to know the prices of mid-grade and high-grade spiritual herbs. Spiritual herbs are usually priceless, Lin Qingchen replied. But there's a place that specializes in selling these priceless treasures. Not only do they sell low-grade and mid-grade spiritual herbs, but they even sell high-grade ones. Where? Yun Ruoyan's eyes sparkled. The 4 Empires Auction House, Lin Qingchen replied. It's at the foot of the Kongming Mountains. I haven't been there with grandfather in a long time. I've heard of that place in the army, but I haven't had the chance to go there yet. Why don't we go together? Yun Moxiao suggested. After Lin Qingchen made some arrangements for the apothecary, the 3 of them headed to the 4 Empires Auction House. There was a villa at the foot of the Kongming Mountains called the Yuelu Villa, where the 4 Empires Auction House was located. By the time Fu arrived at the Yuelu Villa's gates, the sun had already set and night had fallen. The Yuelu Villa was built against the mountain, and it was a majestic sight to behold. All sorts of luxurious carriages were parked in front of the villa, and it was a lively sight to behold. Lin Qingchen alighted from the carriage and led Yun Ruoyan and Yun Moxiao into the Yuelu Villa. When one of the caretakers approached Yun Ruoyan and the others to ask what they were doing there, Lin Qingchen handed him a jade token. As soon as the caretaker saw the token, he respectfully greeted Miss Lin and the others before leading them into the backyard. Where are they being taken? Yun Ruoyan asked Lin Qingchen, seeing that some of the guests who had entered the Yuelu Villa with them were being taken in different directions by different caretakers. Other than the 4 Empires Auction House, there are many other places in the Yuelu Villa, Lin Qingchen replied as they walked. They're not going to the 4 Empires Auction House. Although Yun Ruoyan had lived 2 lives, she had almost never stepped out of her family's front door in her first life. Before her marriage to Pei Zio, she would occasionally visit the Lins, but after her marriage she gradually severed all ties with the Lins and never left the Pei's residence. As a result, Yun Ruoyan was no less unfamiliar with the capital than Yun Maxiao was. I once heard from a colleague in the army that there's a dueling arena in the Yuelu villa. Is that true? Yun Maxiao asked softly. Yun Maxiao's colleague was a high-ranking general. According to him, the dueling arena was a place where slaves and magical beasts fought to the death, and it was extremely violent and bloody. Not only did it satisfy the audience's need for visual stimulation, but it was also a place where bets could be placed. Yun Maxiao, on the other hand, really wanted to go in and take a look. I'm not sure about that, Lin Qingchen replied. Lin Qingchen replied, when grandfather and I came here, we only went to the auction house. However, I heard grandfather say that there are many secret places in the Yuelu villa that ordinary people aren't allowed to enter. While they were talking, they were brought to a courtyard. There was a small building in the courtyard, which was the Four Nations auction house. As the three of them entered the building, they were greeted by a magnificent, brightly lit hall. In the middle of the hall was a tall stage which Lin Qingchen told them was the auction stage. In a while, all of the items up for auction would be displayed and auctioned off on that stage. The three of them stood at the entrance. There were staircases on both sides that led to private rooms on both floors. There were 3 floors in total, and Yun Ruoyan estimated that there were more than 20 private rooms. Yun Ruoyan looked around. The first and second floors didn't have curtains, but the third floor did have curtains to ensure privacy. The second floor had the most people in it, and the first floor also had some people but not many. On the third floor, only 2 or 3 of the curtained rooms were visible and the rest were empty. When the manager asked if they were going to be auctioned or auctioned, Lin Qingchen replied that they were going to be auctioned. The manager motioned for them to follow him, and they followed him down the stairs to the last room on the first floor. Within the room, someone was tabulating the items to be auctioned off. When asked who the items belonged to, Yun Ruoyan had Lin Qingchen say that she was from the Lin family. Lin Qingchen didn't object. This was the first time that Yun Ruoyan had found out that the title of a pill master had added value to the auction of spiritual pills. Although it was a low-grade pill with the Lin family's title, its starting price was more than double that of the nameless pillmaster's pill. She had 3 Darkened Heavens pills in her possession. 2 of them were high quality and 1 was high quality. Because she was using the Lin family's title, she took out her best Darkened Heavens pill. A low-grade Darkened Heavens pill, one of the women in charge of testing the pills announced. High-grade starting price, 10 taels of gold. As the man in charge of recording the bids put away Lin Qingchen's 2 boxes of pills, he wrote a document and pushed it in front of Lin Qingchen. 10 taels of gold. Yun Ruoyan's heart couldn't help but tremble. Although her monthly stipend had increased several times, it was still only 10 taels of silver. A low-grade spiritual pill like this was 100 times her monthly stipend. No wonder pillmasters were said to be the wealthiest profession on the Qinyuan continent. At this rate, she wouldn't have to worry about money anymore. The 3 of them looked at the document and found it to be in order. Lin Qingchen took out the jade tablet that she had shown the manager at the beginning and stamped a bright red stamp on the document, with the words Lin Family's Apothecary written on it. After a series of procedures were completed, the group was informed that this item would be the 3rd item to be auctioned off that night. Then they were led by the manager to a private room on the 1st floor. Everyone, please wait for a moment. Once everyone has arrived, the auction will begin immediately. After saying that, the manager left the private room. The 3 of them sat in the room and waited for the auction to begin. Qingchen, did you and grandfather come here often in the past? Yun Ruoyan asked, seeing that Lin Qingchen was quite familiar with the procedures. When I was 7 or 8, grandfather and I would often come here to auction off the family's spiritual pills, Lin Qingchen replied. At the time, grandfather hadn't given up on searching for my parents and second uncle. He spent a lot of money searching the Qinyuan continent, but eventually gave up when he couldn't find any more hope. At that time, Lin Zainan had already given away more than half of his fortune, and the Lin family had begun to decline. After hearing Lin Qingchen's words, both Yun Ruoyan and Yun Maxiao fell silent. In that silence, Yun Ruoyan suddenly felt a gaze on her. She subconsciously raised her head to look for the source of the gaze, but she didn't find it. Instead, she discovered that a previously empty private room on the third floor had suddenly become occupied. Soon after, more people arrived. Most of them were seated on the second floor, with few on the first and few on the third. Yun Ruoyan didn't understand the reason, so she asked Lin Qingchen. Lin Qingchen told her that the first floor was for the auctioneers, the second was for the buyers, and the third was reserved for special individuals on the Qinyuan continent. These individuals, regardless of whether they were buyers or sellers, could sit in the private rooms on the third floor. Ding! At this moment, on the high platform in the center of the hall, a rather handsome man in a blue robe rang the small bronze bell on the platform. The bronze bell wasn't big, but the sound it made was extremely clear, echoing throughout the entire hall. "Silence, everyone," the blue-robed man began. "Tonight's auction will now begin. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.